Hey everyone, welcome to TechStrong TV. I'm Alan Schimmel, and today is Tuesday, August 4th. Wow, it's August 4th. It seems like we just started doing TechStrong TV yesterday or last week, but you know what? It was the end of March already, and it's been going on for some time. This is actually episode 74, so we've shot 74 episodes. And hopefully, well, if this is your first time joining TechStrong TV, thank you. I hope you enjoy it. If you're not familiar with what we do here, for the next 2 to 3 hours, we're going to showcase generally a bunch of commentary, interviews, and news around DevOps, digital transformation, cloud native, and cybersecurity. And we'll have guests, some of the vendors, thought leaders in each of these spaces, talking about what's new, how things are being affected by what's going on in the world. And it's not just myself interviewing these people. We are regularly joined every day by our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon. We usually also feature a analyst corner with Mitchell Ashley, CEO founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. And then we have a rotating cast of regular contributors such as Mike Verzard on Channel Roundup. We have Jane Grohl, CEO, co-founder of DevOps Institute, on her Jane Explains videos. And more. And then we also have a series of sort of reoccurring series. One is called DevOps Unbound, which is just getting started. It'll be on next week. And then we have another one, CISO Talks, hosted by myself and Unisys CISO Matt Newfield. Siri was chiming in there. And we have a new one we're going to be announcing this week. It's actually an existing podcast that's moving over to TechStrong TV and our Security Boulevard and Digital Anarchist. And that is the Unsung Heroes of Cyber with Gary Berman, your host Gary Berman. We're really excited with that show too, by the way. So that's the kind of stuff you can expect here. For those of you who have been here before and know what to expect, I'm sorry you had to sit through that, but wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. Let me tell you what we have in store for in our lineup for today. Our first interview is going to be with Pavlo Baron, who's the co-founder CTO of Instana. And Instana is one of these companies that have seen the market they play in go from sort of APM to AI ops, and now of course the big buzzword is observability. So Pavlo is going to talk to us about observability and what's new, what's old, and what's going on with Instana. After that, I'm joined by my friend Setu Kulkarni. Setu has been with White Hat now for a number of years. I think he's currently Chief Strategy Officer there. And Setu is going to talk to us about how applications are driving the world's economy, especially in this time of COVID, and the security implications that this brings. And it's something, obviously, that White Hat is very aware of and in the middle of. And then, staying on the cyber front today, I'm really happy to be joined by my friend Mike Rothman. I know Mike many, many years when he first started Security Insight, then Securosis, and now, of course, Disrupt Ops, where he's president and co-founder. And Mike and I have a really good conversation about, the challenges of bringing security to a DevOps world where developers, DevOps folks, SREs are responsible for security, or are they? Maybe, but they're certainly involved in security, and this presents a sea change for how we've done security in the past, where it really was the security team's job to do security. It still is, but anyway, great conversation with Mike. I think you're going to like that. Then we're going to go into the archives for something old today. And for something old, again, we went back to TechStrong Con, still kind of repeating over the 50-odd sessions from TechStrong Con. And this one actually features Mitchell Ashley, our very own Mitch Ashley, CEO, co-founder of Accelerated Strategies Group. And Mitchell did a good one on strategic DevOps, examining topics including business accelerations for digital transformation, reliance on DevOps investment, cybersecurity, and more. And I think you'll like Mitchell's presentation there. And then I'll be back to give you the news headlines around the Media Ops neighborhoods, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, DevOps.com. And then we'll hand things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor, where Charlene will have a good conversation with the co-founder CEO of CyberCon, and Paolo Sciaccarni. And I've interviewed Paolo myself. But this is an interview Charlene did with him. I think you'll like it. Then Charlene also has a great webinar preview of the webinars for the rest of this week on Media Ops. I think we have maybe 4 more webinars this week. All of them, maybe it's 5. All of them are really good. Some on cyber, some DevOps, some cloud native. Then we'll turn things over to Mitchell at the Analyst Corner, where Mitchell has some good commentary today. But he also has an interview with my friend Tracy Reagan, who's the CEO of Deploy Hub, as well as being a board member of the CDF. And it's good discussion there. And then that'll wrap things up. I'll be back to wrap it up after that, probably about 2.5 hours from now. So hope you enjoy it. I think it's going to be a great show. Stick around. We're going to have a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with our first guest.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue, or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
Ready for our first guest today. It's Pavlo Baran. Pavlo is the co-founder CTO at Instana. Pavlo also presented at our TechStrong conference back in early June. Instana is a company that finds itself now kind of being one of the leaders in the observability space. And, Pavlo, Instana was started in Germany, where Pavlo's based. And he has an interesting take on how this market has developed into what today, we're labeling observability. So let's go to our interview now with Pavlo Baran and hear his take on this.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel, and you're watching another segment here on TechStrong TV. This segment features Pavlo Baran, who is a co-founder, CTO at Instana, and we're going to tell you more about that in just a moment, but let me welcome Pavlo to TechStrong TV. Pavlo, welcome to TechStrong TV, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for having me.
It's our pleasure. So, Pavlo, I don't think Instana is a foreign name to our DevOps audience. It's a company we have featured in the past. We've done extensive coverage. We've done activities. You were kind enough to present at our TechStrong Con event back in early June. I'm going to continue a little bit about that discussion today. But there might be people in our audience who aren't familiar with the Instana story and who Instana is and how you came to be the co-founder CTO there. So why don't we start with that, if you don't mind? Give us a little background.
Okay, sure. So we formed Instana out of a consulting company here in Germany. So I'm based in Germany. And we started off with 3 out of 4 founders were effectively in the same company facing challenges around application performance management with all kinds of different tools. So we've been selling all different tools implemented by competitors who are competitors right now, and doing installations and effectively performance troubleshooting with our customers and for our customers. And then we realized that the whole world is shifting towards microservices, towards containerization, etc. And the vendors we've been looking at have not really embraced this development, and we've seen a total need for to kind of go into this area. So we decided to start an own company, which was quite an adventure out of Germany to start a U.S. incorporated and go after venture money, etc., etc. But here we are. We are out of stealth for around about 5 years now, and we have over 200 happy customers who are believing in our message, which effectively is very simple. Give everybody application performance management / monitoring tool they deserve, which effectively means not really expecting anybody to be the ultimate expert in the area, but solving the problems for them with pretty simple approaches, but quite sophisticated behind the scenes. And this is what we believe into, and we are expanding this more and more into the areas like observability, to serve with our messaging.
Right. There used to be a commercial and a saying, you can't make wine before it's time. And sometimes, you as a tech thought leader, as someone who's really kind of living that tech world, you see a problem maybe before the mainstream sees the problem, right? And the issues that you and your co-founders saw around some of the products and the move with containers and microservices 4 or 5 years ago, it wasn't necessarily called observability or what the solutions we were going to try to do. No one was using the term observability then, right? And so sometimes you're out a little bit ahead of the wave. Or maybe what you're doing is something that always needs to be done, and it's a problem that was always a problem. We just didn't call it that, right? It was called something else, or maybe it had no name. But certainly, observability has become, I see it here doing this, right, Pavlo? We are seeing observability become such a hot buzzword, and I'm afraid when I hear buzzwords too much, right? Is it going to live to the hype? When you talk about observability, what do you mean? Tell our audience, what do we mean when we say observability?
Okay, thank you very much for mentioning this. So effectively, the term itself is not new, but it has not been a hype like it is right now for quite some time. We call it monitoring, we call it APM, we call it log management, we call it metrics, solutions. However you call this, the problem is still the same. You kind of have special kinds of data that can be collected outside of the core business that give you visibility and control over the systems while they are running, while they are being operated. Now, this is classically a domain occupied by operations people. Has always been. Now what we've seen early enough is the total shift left towards the developers. Developers historically don't want to, they never operated production systems. They actually don't really want to go on schedule, still don't, but they get more and more responsibility for the systems they are running, writing. They get the responsibility to operate them. And in order to do so, they need the tools to enable them, right? While classic monitoring is very, very, very passive. It tries to apply what is needed to look into the system state kind of from outside without touching the system itself. Observability shifts this into the hands of the developer by telling, hey, just instrument whatever you like, whatever means you take in order to get your code instrumented with this little instruments that allow you to look inside It doesn't matter if you go after metrics, it doesn't matter if you go after traces or logs, whatsoever. Whatever solves the problem of you needing to understand the health of a in production, you got it. And this is how we see the observability. Our personal take on this is, well, it generates an additional problem because once you have all these different tools, you got to be using them. And instrumenting the code is not really part of the core business. You cannot really maintain large teams who will be instrumenting everything just to get visibility, because this is not what you pay them for. You pay them to, to produce business value, to do new features, whatever. Everything else is a byproduct. The cheaper it is to get them there into the visibility they need, the faster they can do it, they can achieve it, the less management they need to do around this once they release new versions of the software, etc., the better it is. And this is where Instana's own take on observability is kicking in, namely, make it simple, make it automated, as much automated as possible, give them the tools they need still, allow them to instrument when they want to, but eliminate effectively boilerplate that is not necessary, not absolutely necessary.
Excellent. Excellent. So, as I mentioned at the top of the show, Pavlo, you were kind enough to present at TechStrong Con, and you presented a little bit around observability, but specifically the unique challenges that large enterprises, right? And there was when I first started DevOps.com, there was a big argument. Was there one kind of DevOps for large enterprises versus one kind of DevOps for startups? And I was always of the opinion that there's only one DevOps, but each organization, depending on their size, their needs, whatever, they do what makes sense for them. But I also I think we all recognize that large enterprises have a unique set of challenges. And though observability is observability at the large enterprise has unique challenges. And I know this is something that you're kind of passionate about, and you talk and write and look into and study the problem a lot. Talk to us a little bit about this problem, and what do you see?
Absolutely. Well, I don't want to spoil my own presentation, so people should be watching it, but I'll give enough hints.
Wait, just a quick plug. It is available still on TechStrongCon.com or on digitalanarchist.com. You can go on and watch Pavlo's presentation right now. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. Speaking of that, generally enterprise is big and diverse. Introducing any kind of cultural change, which happens with DevOps, for example, is quite a challenge, because you need to change so much in the DNA of this company before you can even take the first steps. That's why approaches like site reliability engineering that are less aggressive on culture, more aggressive on technology and then the way of work inside of the IT organization are taking off as a version of DevOps cultural shift that can be implemented in an enterprise. Now, those people are still, fighting on so many levels. Speaking of diversity, an enterprise might have different silos that are completely independent. Now, you come with a culture that tries to establish team cooperation, team collaboration. You need a tool that gives them the same view on the same things. You don't want everybody to reinvent the wheel all the time, especially around monitoring, because this is going to be expensive with licenses, and it's not going to be fair. You want to care about standards. You want to care about reusability. You want to onboard your people as soon as possible. You want kind of still be able to move fast, adopting new technologies, but still fit into the existing blueprints, because you still bring so much legacy systems to the table. You cannot really rewrite everything. So everything you go after, I haven't seen. I would have to see an enterprise so far that would go into the cloud 100%. It's always a hybrid scenario. Now you have all diverse infrastructure pieces. that where everything is calling something different. It's calling some Lambda somewhere. The Lambda is calling back into their own data center to do some database work whatsoever. It's complex systems. So complexity and systems being inhomogeneous are a huge challenge. So for an enterprise, it is important to work with tools that first harmonize or kind of make it uniform what they see. So it doesn't matter that your workload runs in Kubernetes on GKE or it runs in your own data center in some legacy stack. It simply doesn't matter. If this is a business application, you should have a uniform view on that. This is where in Standard's application perspectives, we call them explicitly like that, effectively give you the necessary support. You can harmonize access to, well, application logic and its performance and its health through the same things that everybody understands. Enterprises are good at internally establishing domain languages. They work inside of, well, not too many domains, let's say, mostly one plus maybe a few smaller subdomains. Now, once having a language, you want to, introduce this language into every kind of system and every kind of tool that you work with. You don't want the team A to speak different language than the team B. So they need to be collected around the same kind of, tools when they try to solve the problem. And still you want to make them collaborate with each other, which means that when an incident occurs and you're moving fast as an enterprise by having hundreds of feature teams, however you call them, squads, whatever approach you're taking, when there is an incident, it's rarely isolated inside one territory. Everybody needs to work with each other. When they work with all different kinds of tools, they will just be wasting time. You need to give them a single pane of glass, the same tool, the same approach, the same logical abstractions. And ideally, you don't pay 100 times for this. You just have also a uniform licensing, which is simple enough for you because your systems are so inhomogeneous, right?
Right.
So this is just a few things. Challenges in the enterprise can go way further than that, but we can have these technical discussions for hours.
Right.
The important thing is diversity, complexity, and kind of necessity. If you go after digital transformation, you will always be moving stepwise. The necessity to see things in steps, ideally as automated as possible, and recognizing are you performing better, worse? Did you improve things? Did you disimprove things? Also, embracing learning. The enterprise needs, when they migrate into new technology stacks, step by step, at least some of the workloads they want to learn. It's not, it's not like 100 people all know all the different kinds of technologies in there. There is just fragmented knowledge, and this also needs some kind of a uniform understanding. So observability in the enterprise, the challenge is explicitly around to make it uniform, to make it accessible, to make it consumable by everybody. And this everybody can be everybody really in this organization. It can be a tester, it can be a DevOps engineer, it can be a developer, it can be a manager. They need to speak the same language. And in our territory of observability, it is very important to give them a tool like that.
Absolutely. We're doing a new kind of reoccurring show here on DevOps, on TechStrong TV, called DevOps Unbound. And I actually recorded the first episode yesterday. And it was focused on testing, actually. We had one fellow was a PhD with a PhD in testing. And one fellow was actually a high school dropout who was into game design, then got into coding, obviously with game, and became a tester and was one of the very first testers at Apple back in 1987 or 82 or something like that. And so very different paths. But they spoke about the same thing, and that is, when you look at, even if you go way back to the 50s and 60s and then the 70s, at the sort of the genesis of what we consider IT and computer software development right now, right? And, everyone was a developer. There was no tester. There was no necessarily ops person. It was hardware. And over time, right, it's kind of life itself, right? It's become more complex and specialized, and we have, these silos or whatever you want to call them. But at the end of the day, and with shift left, we're seeing this a little bit. There's that interrelationship between them. What we ask the developer, the coder, to do is intimately related to what we do in testing, what we do in security, what we do in traditional ops, and now with AI ops and observability and what used to be called ALM and stuff. It's almost as much as things change, the more they stay the same at some level. Maybe we have new names and stuff like that. But on the backdrop of new technologies, you mentioned Kubernetes and microservices and these new, it's kind of infrastructure, right? A new stack of what we're developing on. I guess, though, Pavlo, we need to acknowledge sort of what's an elephant a bit in the room, and that is what we're going through now with COVID and everybody working remotely, and from what we read, things are better in Germany than they are in parts here of the U.S. in terms of the response and the infection rates. How has that affected all of this, you think? In some ways, it's an acceleration, right? Because people need to get this done. We need to transform. In other ways, I'm sure it's a hindrance. What's your observation on it?
Well, first of all, this is generally a very tragic topic, and no matter what we come out with, it's going to be, it's really threatening the humanity. But speaking of technical challenges, of course, you already mentioned that. We can truly believe that the future work is going to change massively, which means that people probably, even if they can, they will not want or not always be able to speak, over the table with each other, which introduces a very special challenge to name this, to uniform views on things. And remote way of work is actually, even if you communicate a lot, it is limited in regards to what you can communicate, right? There is no real chemistry. There is just video, just audio. People need to have to be in agreement very fast on things they're talking about. And for this, view on the same things, uniform understanding of the domains is very important. Same tooling, of course. This is extremely important. You should be working with the same tools. You should be handing over responsibility. You will be, we read all kinds of stories that Barbados are offering everybody to go work remotely for a year. And I actually know people who really jump on that train and just want to move over and enjoy the sun. Long story short,
I would tell them to wait till after hurricane season, though, Pavlo.
You're right. Well, there's always a price you need to pay for something, right?
I live in South Florida. I know all about it. Yes.
Right. Yes.
But go ahead.
Right. The thing is that we can expect that through the change of how people work, and especially in our area, on how people work around problems that happen around IT systems, formalization, abstraction, automation, way less manual work, and whatever is going to happen. This is what we clearly see in our customers. So everybody, of course, is affected by what is happening right now. But we see that our customers are pretty happy with what we offer to them, and new customers are joining because they clearly tell us, listen, with Instana, I have so much work I can shift towards what matters because this thing is just working for me completely automatically. I just love it. People want to focus on what matters. It's going to be extremely hard to get out of this, economic challenge all over the world. focus is going to be the king. You don't want to invest into, managing your tools effectively. You should not be doing this anyway. But when the budgets are full, it's a different story than when you're trying to get back to regular business. So long story short, I think it's going to be great for technology in general. I think it's going to be great for new technologies as well, because the speed of adoption is going to be real fast. Everybody will go digital for sure. I don't want to use one more buzzword, but you probably get, you get the point what I mean by that. It is just this change, right? And we have a perfect tool for that. We have designed it for this. It works with people sitting at the same table, but it also works with people distributed all over the world in different time zones and regions. So we're pretty confident that our tool is the right choice. We are also very supportive to economic recovery. We need to be careful with this crisis that we have right now. I think humanity is going to come out stronger than ever before out of this. And
I hope so. I hope and pray so as well. And I think technology leads the way.
Yes, right.
Look, where would we be without technology right now? I tell people this. Thank God the internet has behaved just as intended. Really,
right.
You get an outage here and there, but overall, thank God, right, for the internet and for the cloud and everything, the scalability and burstability, the elasticity. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Anyway, Pavlo, when I first started, I said the time goes so quick, and it does. We're so past 20 minutes right now. But first of all, I want to thank you for joining us and sharing with us. Again, thank you for presenting at TechStrong Con. Come back and visit us in a couple of weeks, and we can continue the discussion maybe.
Totally.
Good?
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
All right. My pleasure. All right, Pavlo Baran, CTO co-founder at Instana here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest. My next interview is with my friend Setu Kulkarni. Setu's been with White Hat now for at least 4, maybe more years. Business development, strategy, sales. Really just a great business executive. And, one of the things, and I've told this to people, is where would we be in all this COVID mess without the internet, without applications working the way they are? My wife had a little ear infection this weekend, and where normally we would have to go to a doctor, and who wants to go to a doctor's office unnecessarily today? We dialed up the app. We did a telemedicine visit. We told them what put in what our pharmacy was. The doctor sent over the prescription, and 20 minutes later, my wife was already taking her first dose of antibiotic. It's that kind of, we take it for granted. My wife took it for granted, but, even just 10 or 20 years ago, that kind of thing would not be possible. And so applications really are driving the world and the world's economy. And what are the security implications to this? What does it bring, right? There was all kinds of HIPAA stuff here as we put in information, and we spoke to a doctor over a video link on our phone. Setu Kulkarni is going to talk to us about that, and I think you're going to enjoy this interview.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, Thanks for joining us on this next segment here for TechStrong TV. My guest is Setu Kulkarni. Setu is VP of Corporate Strategy at White Hat Security. And Setu, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Alan, it's always great to be with you.
It's always good to see you, my friend. I see you're home, as most of us are. Crazy times. But first of all, it's said to our audience is familiar, I think, with White Hat Security, but maybe there are some people out there who aren't familiar. Why don't we give them just a quick kind of White Hat Security background and maybe weave in a little bit of your background into it?
Certainly, Alan. Happy to. So if you look at White Hat, our mission at White Hat is to secure the applications that run pretty much our lives today, right? And I think that's very thematic as well, because as we cope with post-COVID, digital life, modern applications are becoming a part of our life, right? It's a way of life now. And we're in the business of securing these applications so companies and organizations and their consumers and customers do not get breached. That's what White Hat does. We've been around for quite a bit. We've been around for almost 20 years. Around a year ago, we transitioned to NTT. NTT Security is our mothership. We're a part of the NTT family of companies. And I've been at White Hat for almost 4.5 years, Alan. And I run corporate strategy here, everything from yearly business planning to operationalizing that business plan, mergers and acquisitions, and eventually working with various partners around the globe.
Absolutely, and I remember working with you. It was probably about 4 years ago. Anyway, this is before NTT, and I was still White Hat. And you being a little modest, White Hat Security is actually one of the pioneers in web application security and self-service web application testing and so forth. In a lot of ways have set the mark that the rest of the industry has followed, over the past 20 or so years.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, web application security and White Hat are synonymous, right? We were the pioneers in this space, and we've gotten the due recognition from the analysts, from the market, and more importantly, from all the thousands of customers we secure.
Absolutely. So, Setu, our topic today, though, is really, web apps are running the world, and never more so is this evident during these COVID times that we find ourselves in now, where we are just, unable to go out in the physical world, to go to a store, to go to a doctor, to go to, a care provider or anywhere. And so we're totally dependent on the internet and on the applications on our phones and computers to provide us not only with food and medicine and supplies, but with entertainment and communication and so much more, right? When we say applications, are running the economy, it's not just running the economy. They're running the world is running on these applications now, and it's I mean, in some ways it's a great thing, right? Because this internet was designed to withstand a nuclear holocaust. So a pandemic, small potatoes, right? It's run surprisingly well, considering a lot of, internet providers are running on skeleton staffs and with people remote, and how many people are working remotely right now, putting more strain on the pipes of the net and so forth. But yet the resiliency and performance has been remarkable. Yeah, there's outages now and then, but not any more than usual, it seems like. And so it's been amazing. But equally amazing has been the wide variety of applications that we're seeing, right? E-commerce stuff, because if you're a retailer today and you're not selling online, you're not selling, right? Very few people coming to the stores. So from retail to, as I mentioned, health and medical, business communications, the fact that we're here on Zoom, and how, you like I, we would do Zoom before this. But how many Zoom calls are you on a day these days? And if it's not Zoom, it's WebEx or Microsoft Team or Blue Jeans or something else. And we take it for granted. A lot of people, I think, have begun taking it for granted that it just is. And that's always the sign of something that's truly, when it's reached mainstream, we don't think of it as special anymore. It's just that's the way it is. And I think a lot of people also don't think about what goes into making sure these applications are secure. Right? Security is paramount, and it's in many of these. So, how are you guys? How's White Hat helping with that, and what are you guys seeing with it?
You're right, Alan. I think this thing is personal, right? Applications are no longer just business. I'll kind of give you a quick kind of funny example. You'll get a chuckle out of this. I have a 3.5-year-old, and she comes to me a couple days ago and she says, "Can you tell me the meeting ID for my class?" I was like, "Wait a minute, you're 3.5 years old. You want to know about the meeting ID?" So that's the point I think you're trying to make. That's the point I'm trying to make, right? Applications they used to be the storefront, right? Think about e-commerce. We would say, oh, applications are the storefront. But now they're the new information desk. They're the new doctor's office. They're the new classroom. They're the new music class. They're the new birthday party. Everything happens on the internet, on these applications. And that's really where White Hat comes into the picture. We are on a mission to make sure that these applications that are now being used by millions of people now are as secure as they can be, right? That's the mission White Hat is on. We are trying and helping organizations secure the applications that run their business, that help their customers get on with life. So you're absolutely right. I read a survey or a statistic somewhere. Internet traffic, Alan, believe it or not, in the last 4 months has gone up by 70%, between 50 and 70%. Where's all that internet traffic coming from? What's the ingress or the doors and windows? These are applications that you're using on your computer, I'm using on my computer and on my phone. And that's really what needs to be secured today. And that's what we are doing here at White Hat.
Absolutely. First of all, I'm not surprised that your 3.5-year-old is asking for a meeting ID, because this generation, think about when she grows up. Digital native doesn't even begin to describe it. She'll grow up with memories of this time frame, and how basically you lived online. We were talking off camera, and I was telling you, this weekend my wife had an earache, and it bothered her for 2 days, and it was really painful, and she wasn't sure whether to go to the doctor's office or an urgent care clinic or something. And she was quite frankly afraid to go, because why expose yourself at a doctor's office, unless it's really something worthy of it. And I said, what are you doing? We have Teledoc, through our health insurance. I installed the app on her phone, answered a few questions, asked for an appointment, took her right into a waiting room. Within 5 minutes, she was on a video with a physician, with a doctor, who asked her a bunch of questions. She even had to take the video and show him her ear, so he got to look at it and everything, not much different than being in person. Diagnosed what it was, prescribed an antibiotic, asked us to fill in what a pharmacy we use, and it was just put in your zip code. It brought up all the pharmacies nearby, and you picked one. And he said, all right, we're sending it right over. And 5 minutes later, we checked in with Walgreens, and the prescription would be ready in 15 minutes. Within 20 minutes, my wife had taken the first dose of antibiotic already. And, if you would tell someone 50 years ago that that's how her doctors visit went, they would have thought it was kind of George Jetson, right? It was the Jetsons. Not, they wouldn't believe it. Even 20 years ago, it sounds kind of Jetsony, right? And but yet, and my wife thought nothing of it. She was like, "Oh, that's great." I said, "But Bonnie, think about this. You got a live doctor on a video who looked at your prescribed medicine. The prescription was sent directly to the pharmacy, who then got that, looked up your insurance, filled it, decided what you're going to be paid, and we were able to get it to you in 20 minutes. That's amazing. But what's even more amazing is we're dealing with HIPAA in that, right? All of this information is personal PII, personally identifiable information. It's health records, all taking place on an app on the phone, right? I mean, a small example, but so much. I mean, you and I both know security-wise what goes into that.
Right? It does. It does. And actually, that's a great example, Alan, because if you think about the conversation between your wife and the doctor, there was mutual trust established. Mm-hmm. And how was that mutual trust established? It was established by the application interface. The fact that you had a verified application, you trust the provider of the application, you're able to actually trust the person on the other end of the application, which is the doctor. So I think that example quite critically and importantly points out the nature of that application. It has to be secure. It has to be trustworthy. And that's really where application security is paramount. If we can secure, test, and monitor these applications that are running in production, that are helping connect consumers to business providers to business providers, consumers to consumers, that's how we get a more secure online digital experience. It's by testing, monitoring, and controlling these applications that are running in production. That is critical.
Yep. But I guess it's a little bit of the nature of the beast set too. So I even though it was rather simple, I was in awe of the whole thing. My wife took it as very matter of fact. It is, fantastic, great. I got help from my ear. My ear's feeling better already. This is the curse of security, that unless something gets broken, breached, hacked, we take it for granted, right? Of course it was a secure handoff. Of course the information and my information that was sent from that app via the doctor to the pharmacy was done securely and no one had access to that or breached into it. Of course the information from the insurance carrier to the pharmacy, right, was done in a confidential, secure way. And of course the pharmacy notifying me to come pick up the prescription and the details of it was done securely. And we take it for granted until it's not, right? And when it's not done securely, then, the dogs, let out the dogs and let's, we're all in trouble. And that's part of the issue is when security does its job, no one questions it. No one says, "Hey, good job. Great job, security." No one even seems to really think about all that goes in at every step of this way, right? Was that video encrypted or secured? How was it done? I mean, and that and I'm not looking to beat our chest and say, "Oh, the great security people enable all of this," but the fact is that unless something gets broken, hacked, breached, people take it for granted.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, security today is table stakes, right? I think that's the point you're trying to make. And the fact that it's table stakes doesn't mean it's easy, right? There's a lot of effort that goes behind making applications, the internet, more secure. Although what I'd say, Alan, is these are unprecedented times. So I think it's kind of good to talk about a couple topics here. For example, to your point, your wife, when she looked at the app, she's like, yeah, it's a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Think about it, right? There are more people that are getting onto the internet and particularly onto applications. And these are the most vulnerable, susceptible people. Young kids, the elderly, people who never had access to internet or applications before. Suddenly they have computers, they have Chromebooks, they have applications that they're using. They're implicitly trusting these applications. On the other hand, though, you have to also remember that folks who are developing these applications, the developers, the development teams, they're being asked to produce more applications, release them more often, update them more often, in shorter time with fewer resources. So if we don't balance the security act, this entire ship can keel over. So that's really why I think having the security team participate in the act of developing the application, when it goes into production, make sure they're testing it, monitoring it becomes really critical.
Agreed. Yes, we need the security team involved in it. And this is a subject we discuss a lot around here, too, and that is there aren't enough, just like there aren't enough developers and resources to do all the apps we want to do, there are certainly not enough security people to work in all of these development teams and all of these apps. I mean, if it was only 10 developers to one security person, we'd say great, but it's actually much worse than that. So to me, the key is developing security tools that don't necessarily require a security person to use and to secure the app, right? So having a security team that kind of blesses, if you will, a particular security tool to use as part of your DevOps process, as part of your development, CD pipeline, but making that security tool accessible and usable by the developer, by the DevOps guys, by the test people, by the CD team, by the SREs after the fact, so that we can, kind of force multiply by making security everyone's responsibility, can help alleviate, because if we rely solely on the security team to do the security, we'll just never have enough people. We'll never have enough resources to do that well. We're always, trying to play catch up there. So it's really important that we enable and we empower these other people to be involved.
That's absolutely right. Now, look, we've heard this many times from our customers as well, right? And one of the favorite stories I like to tell is we had a customer who had bought all the tools that money could buy, so to say. He said, I'm having a challenge deploying them. I'm having a challenge operationalizing the tool. I'm having a challenge acting on the insight that these tools are providing. Deploy, operationalize, act, DOA, dead on arrival. That approach is dead on arrival. And that's really why we fundamentally believe that we need to have a security testing platform that is backed up by security researchers and threat engineers who can not only help the customer deploy and operationalize the capability, but also help the customer make sense out of the results that these tools and services are providing, so that the customer can eventually act in time and have a more secure application.
Agreed. Setu, we're about out of time here. Is there anything else you wanted to were points that we missed or made or that you wanted to hit on?
No, I think we hit on most of the things that are top of mind here for us at White Hat. The one thing that we've been telling everyone is digital transformation before COVID was limited to the technologists, people who are developing applications. But post-COVID, in the new world, everybody is digitally transformed.
I was going to say, we're all being digitally transformed. Yes,
Right.
It's true.
So I would just like to end by saying that the scale of security is not only limited now to the folks who are developing these applications or monitoring or running these applications. All of us are under the umbrella of digital transformation, all 8 billion of us. So the sooner we get security right from an application perspective, the more secure and the more trustworthy conversations and interactions will become in the world. So that was what I'd want to say.
Thank you. All right. Setu Kulkarni, VP Corp Strategy at White Hat Security, part of NTT Security. Actually, it's not called NTT Security anymore. It's NTT
Limited.
Okay. Here on TechStrong TV, this is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
You know, over my 20 plus years in the information security, cybersecurity space, I've made so many friends, lifelong friends, good friendships. But one of my best friends is my friend Mike Rothman. Mike is, we may go a year without seeing each other from RSA to RSA, or maybe we'll see each other on the road, not as much these days. But through the years, Mike has always given me good advice. He's been a voice of reason, not just for me, for the whole security industry. I remember his first book, The Practical CISO. And back then, you know, the whole concept of a CISO was new. And we've had great discussions over the years, really great discussions. Mike is our guest on our next episode of CISO Talks with Matt Newfield, Mitchell Ashley, and myself. That's next Monday. You want to check that out. It was a really good discussion. But in this interview with Mike, we talk about how kind of who's doing security has changed, right? The security team, the security pro, is obviously still involved, but we live in a world today where developers, DevOps team members, SREs, etc., you want to call them SecOps, these people are also not only responsible for security, but actually performing security tasks. What does that mean for security tools and services? Do they cater to these people? Do they cater to the security people? Can you serve two masters? A lot of questions, a lot of change. Mike and I explore this briefly because, you know, when Mike and I talk, it's hard to do anything briefly. So this is about a 25-minute interview, but Mike and I really get into it on whose job is it anyway? And good conversation. Let's go now to Mike Rothman, president, co-founder of DisruptOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another segment for our TechStrong TV. In this segment, I'm joined by my friend Mikey. Mike Rothman. Mike is the president and co-founder of DisruptOps.
Yeah, president of all I survey is pretty much the way I describe it, yeah.
Okay, of all he surveys, from his basement office at home, he surveys quite a lot. This isn't George Washington we're talking about surveying here, but in any event, but he is the president and co-founder of DisruptOps, and also for, you know, all my friends out here in the security world, you know who this guy is. He's been with us He's been a fixture in the cyber, as we call it now, the security space for as long as I've been in security. So a long time, and always great words of wisdom. Hey, Mike, welcome.
Alan, my friend, it is, it's always fun. I mean, listen, and that's really what it's about, right? It's about trying to learn some stuff, but ultimately it's about having fun. And I'm just excited to be able to spend some time with my old friend and have some fun.
You know, Mike, I tell people, so after 30 years of chasing venture-backed capital, companies and startups, I didn't think this was, this whole media ops thing that I do it was supposed to be an easy deal, an easy gig, right? And I wasn't going to chase that. But I've never had as much fun as I do doing what I do now. And it's because I get a chance to talk to people like you all day. Doesn't suck. Anyway.
You sit behind your desk on your
my
throne.
Green room,
and
my throne, yeah.
Wax
of all
poetic.
I purvey. Exactly. Hey, what could be bad about this? But anyway, Mike, today's topic is sort of SecOps, right? We grew up, and came up through the ranks, Mike, where we knew who the security guy was. And let's be real, it was a guy, right? And 96.5% of the time, it was a guy. Unfortunately, it's changing a little bit. We've made some progress. It's not always a guy now. But we knew who the security person was, right? It was the security person. They were on the security team. Even if it was a one-man team, but it was the security team. In the world of DevOps and cloud and everything we live in now, software delivery pipelines, it's not necessarily the security guy who's doing security, or is it? And I guess that's the question.
Well, I would say 4 or 5 years ago, it was not the security person, right? I think the DevOps team, the cloud team, whatever you wanted to call them, intentionally went around the security people, right? They went around central IT, but they certainly went around the security people. I think that's been changing a little bit because we're starting to see these center of excellence models start to emerge, sure, where you've got a central team that's really advising a lot of the business IT DevOps groups that are implementing a lot of these new technologies, and really they need some guidance, right? So the security team focuses on guidance and managing the governance and compliance piece of things, and in some cases can actually enforce policies, through some type of standard set of guardrails. But it really is, kind of, and that's one of the things I love to talk about, right, is that it really is kind of not defined who is ultimately going to have a lot of the responsibility to enforce the security policies in a lot of these, DevOps-based applications moving forward, right? Is it the site reliability engineers? Is it, kind of just the developers themselves? Who is the person or individual or group, right, that is responsible for making sure that the security policies are actually enforced in the stacks, right? And I think that's something that is really emerging right now, and we don't have a clear answer. It's something that's pretty squishy in a lot of organizations.
But so let me give you a little analogy. Back when cloud, right? Remember what was the biggest inhibitor to the adoption of the cloud? Security, right? Of course, answer number one. Very good, Alex. You want to buy a vowel? But anyway,
you're getting your game show metaphors all screwed up there, man.
Oh, yeah, something in there. But well, look, I'm old. Okay. But anyway, it was security. And one of the issues were a lot of people would say, but don't worry, the cloud provider is putting a ton of money into security, and I'm relying on their security to keep me secure. And the lesson learned there was you could have you could give off responsibility, but it comes back to when there's a breach on your stuff, whether it was in AWS, Google, Microsoft, or in your server closet, it's still your problem.
That's right. Accountability versus responsibility.
That was the word I was looking for. Yep. Accountability versus responsibility. And we see the same, I think we see the same thing right now and it's not just DevOps per se. It's in this whole new way
it's
that
the
we
let me say it's the democratization of technology. Right,
Yes.
where you have technology happening, kind of all over the place in a lot of business. It's spreading to the wind, but ultimately, I believe the security group is accountable for making sure that those
accountable for
policies and
security.
those governance is put in place. I think you're going to have business IT. I think you're going to have DevOps responsible for some of these things, and that's one of the models that kind of makes Disrupt Ops pretty interesting. Is that what we're focused on is really enabling or deputizing, in effect, a lot of these developers, a lot of these ops people to make those changes, because we know the security folks don't necessarily have the power.
They don't live there.
Or they're right. They're not empowered to make changes in a lot of these specific environments. They go and they send an alert, they put in a JIRA ticket, right, and it goes and it languishes for X number of times. If we can actually get the information to the people who actually have to make the change, right, the ops people, the developers, then they're in a much better position with all the context that is provided through a lot of the APIs, a lot of the native services that you were just talking about. Then they're in a much better position to know, oh, this policy was violated, click a button, fix it, or escalate it here, or suppress it, right? This is nonsense. I know this was a change that I made intentionally. Just suppress this so I don't get this alert every 3 minutes, which again contributes to that idea of alert fatigue. And if you think the security people get very frustrated with kind of all the alerts that they get hit with, I mean, think about the developer who's dealing with any number of different things. They get popped with 100 different security alerts. They're not only going to shut it down, they're never going to take the call again, right? So we have to make sure that we're working together to really empower these folks to protect the information, but not really impact their ability to get things done.
Yep. So here's another fundamental problem or issue that we need to recognize when we talk about who's responsible for security today. And there are they estimate there's something like 42 or 44 million developers in the world. If it was a country, it would be the fastest growing country on earth, adding about 20% a year. That's just developers. That's not necessarily testers, SREs, IT ops folks. Take that number, and how many security people do you think are in the world, Mike? A couple million at most. At most
5-6 million, maybe. And I know we could go to 10, or there's opportunity for 10 or 12, but we can't find them.
Right, if you had them, really exist today. So fundamentally, we have to recognize that there can't be a one-to-one relationship between security folk and developers, DevOps, SRE, etc. So the only way this thing scales is if this huge mass of population of people are not part of the problem, but part of the solution. And when I first started, doing, like, let's say the RSA DevSecOps thing 5-6 years ago, you and Rich were there helping me, right? It was my mission was to take the DevOps tribe, because it was kind of a tribal thing back then, and introduce the security community. And it was kind of like, it was kind of like Hatfields and McCoys, right? Those developers said, those guys are a pain in the butt. They're a pain in the ass. All they do is ever say no, and I get a million alerts from them, and they won't let me ignore it. And I hate these people. They're anti-business.
F these guys. I've heard that more than once.
Absolutely. But to be fair, and and that's what we always heard from them. To be fair, though, when I asked my security friends, and you heard this too, I'm sure, because we all have, we're the only ones. I kind of felt like Donald Trump at the 2016 Republican convention. I'm the only one who can cure this for you, who could handle this. I alone. That was it. I alone. The security community very much had that. Only I could do security. And if you want to do security, you're going to have to rip it out of my cold, dead, stiff fingers. Right? And it was like this. They knuckles, their fingernails drawing blood. Yeah, the whole thing. So that was that was 6 years ago. We've made a tremendous amount of progress. a tremendous amount. Disrupt ops and tools like that have really helped. I think what the leaders in this space have recognized is security cannot. What responsibility versus accountability.
Well, I'm going to tattoo it on your arm the next time.
I need to write it down like someone's phone number. Anyway, but security cannot give up accountability. They can't, because but it's the nature of the beast. That's the mission. We are accountable for this, but we must give up responsibility for a lot of the tasks, for a lot of what we do there, to these greater numbers, right? And part of that is recognizing that, they do give a crap about security. They may not be security experts, but they give a crap about security. So here's your mission as a security vendor, a tool vendor. Recognize who's going to pay for your tool. Security team. Recognize who has to sign off on it and is accountable. Security. Recognize who's going to use it. Who's going to be in that interface all day. Not security. And so you need to start designing tools that are not made for a security guy. They're made.
No, that's exactly right. And I think part of it has to do with is meeting the developers where they are. Right? Yeah. The developers are in Slack, right? The developers are in Microsoft Teams. The developers are in Jira. So you've got to be able to deliver the information to them where they are and allow them to, one of the taglines we're toying around with is this idea of no alerts. Well, what do you mean no alerts? You're a security person. Oh my God, that's heresy. Oh, get the rope. I mean, hang this guy. He can't possibly be thinking about, no alerts. Well, no, it's not that you're not alerting the person that's responsible, that something's going wrong. It's giving them the opportunity to take action, right? The ability for them to see the information, have the context, and take action right from where they are, right? And I think, again, that's just one of these things that, in hindsight, it's so obvious, but as you're struggling through it, you were scratching your head going, well, why don't the security people, why can't they do this? And it's just like, because the security people aren't the ones with the responsibility to make the changes, right? They're not empowered to do these things. They have to influence, right? They have to persuade, and they have to be able to give the folks the information they need in order to understand what they should do and give them a very easy way to do it.
And that is how we deputize, to use your word, the 44 million plus people who are out here doing that, so that we force multiply the relatively minuscule number of security people we have.
Drink. You said force multiply. You got to drink. That's definitely part of the,
all right. Look,
game.
I'm quoting Donald Trump at a friggin' Republican convention. I'm already probably half drunk.
Yeah, we've driven off the ledge on this one already.
I'm all over that. But anyway, let's not even go here, because it'll go to a bad place. I see where we're heading. Bring it back, Mike. So
this is where we need guardrails, right?
Yeah, this is where we need not an alert, mind you.
No, we need just guardrails. Nudge us back onto the road.
Back on. So that is the mission. But here's another thing I want to bring out, and let's not leave off our friends in SRE and in Ops. The developer. We've created these software factories with the CI/CD pipeline, and the developer kind of rules that roost. He's the alpha, right? At some point, someone presses a deploy button, or it's automated. Stuff's deployed, but it doesn't end the security mission, obviously, nor does it end the DevOps mission. So the cool word these days is observability. Right? It used to be called kind of APM, and then we were hot on this AI ops. Now everyone's circling around observability. And observability. But what does that really mean vis-a-vis security and security operations? And what's the mission there? Is it, we've got accountability, right? And responsibility, but go ahead.
It sounds a lot like visibility to me, right? And we've been talking
Except it's
about
passive.
Well, so is most of what we've been doing in security for a long time. It's not like your vulnerability management tool is an active tool, right? I mean, what we're doing is what we have to have is visibility over all of the resources that you have across your multiple accounts, across your multiple clouds, right? Be able to synthesize all that, understand where the policy violations are, and get that context and information to the folks that can impact change. Right. So I don't see it being much different than what we've been trying to do for a long time. Right. Visibility and then control. The real rub here, which is really a different thing for security, which is so scary for a lot of people, is that we don't actually do the control. Right. That's where we have to deputize or, empower, educate, guide. I mean, whatever words you want to use, we don't have direct influence over a lot of these stacks anymore. So we've got to work with these teams. We've got to be collaborative. We've got to give them the information they need to make the right decisions, which, by the way, is hard. Right? That's hard because, as you said, I mean, you walk into the room, it's like, oh, the security person is here. F that guy.
Right.
Not interested. Whatever you're telling me, not interested, because when it's either compliance time or you have some type of issue, these folks get just, overwhelmed with nonsense, right? Thousands and thousands of alerts every day that just become noise. So it's really about it's not even more about the signal to noise. It's their ability to take very crisp, very clear actions quickly, because they don't, especially an ops person, they don't have time to mess around, right? So if you're not giving them the information they need, they're going to ignore it every day of the week, right? Yep. So that's really where it's interesting, and there's going to be just a huge evolution on the part of what security has to do over the next 2 to 3 years, and it's going to be pretty cool to watch.
I think it's happening, and it goes back to something you said earlier. The same way we have to give the developers the information and the power within the tools and places they live now, you got to do the same things for these ops folks, for these SRE folks. And if it's observability tools they're using, like a Datadog or App Dynamics, or I don't care, there's plenty of them. Right, yeah, Dynatrace, Moogsoft, there's tons, there's a lot of good tools. The good news is a lot of them are made to take multiple, not alerts, because it's all about no alerts, as you said, but multiple, informational cues. And, again, I don't want to recreate the SIM disaster.
Right, so we're partners with Datadog, and we view those as triggers, right? I mean, whatever platform it is, we're putting a big push on Security Hub right now because we know a lot of the folks we want to talk to are aggregating a lot of their findings in Security Hub. It could just as easily be Datadog or any of these other tools. It's right, you get the information there, you figure out what the situation is, you cross a threshold, you basically pull a trigger, and then you take action. Right. Yeah. And that's what we're thinking about. And I think where our view has expanded at Disrupt Ops is that when we said action, it was actually doing something, right? Make a change a configuration, do an API call. What we've realized is that an action could be sending an alert, right? Or putting in a ticket in Jira or ServiceNow or any of these other, specific tools. It's really, again, about giving the information to the people that need it when they need it with an ability to take action. Just sending them information is not good enough anymore. They have to be able to take action from that point of context. Otherwise, it's just going to get lost in the morass.
And it has to be contextual, Mike, because I think one of making security tools for non-security people is if you're going to, send them syntax kind of nonsense, right? That, this is a problem with CVE 2341, which is marked as a critical vulnerability. You want to know the truth? They don't give, excuse my language, they don't give a hoot about that, right?
Now we just got the explicit tag, man.
Yeah, all of a sudden, boom. We'll edit that out. But no, but honestly, they don't care about what criticality NIST or MITRE labeled something. If it's something though that could bring down their whole application, they care about it, right? If it's gonna really, be a fly in the ointment, they care about it. And so again, it's playing to your audience. Now, An interesting thing, because we're running low on time, but I'd love to explore with you next time, is how does all this exist, but the security team still has to pay for it out of the security budget? And security budgets, you don't think so?
I don't know. And that's again, that's one of the open questions, which is, the security folks, they like to do things everywhere, right? When they want to do something like that, so you're a global enterprise, you want to pick a tool and roll that out to everyone. It usually doesn't work too well when the central group is telling all of these empowered business IT DevOps folks what tools they want to use. Right. So I'm not making the assumption that it's the security folks that end up paying for it. I think you could have a bunch of teams that go, listen, I have to impact operations because these security people are making me nuts. So I'm just going to buy this tool. And then it may happen. It may come from the bottom up.
So that's a whole nother issue, right? That's what I call the democratization of IT, right? And what's today's, this gets to the rise of open source. I think in today's world that we're talking about, these tools are, so the average enterprise has multiple DevOps teams, right? Not many companies are so advanced that they have a DevOps team across everything. There's bubbles of DevOps within the company. Now, each of these teams, not just security-wise, but they all use the tools of their choice. And 9 times out of 10, these are tools that the developers or DevOps teams picked. They're generally open source. They didn't cost them any money. They bring it in. They use it. Does it work good? Do I like it? Right? There's no sales guy calling them. Right. It's a free tool. It's free to a certain 10 users or whatever. Then what happens is the manager says, you know what? The CIO or whoever is talking about standardizing. And developer says, well, Mike, I love this tool I've been using. I use the open source version, but if we got the enterprise version of it, look at all this other functionality I would get. And it kind of works its way up. So it is bottom up. The same thing, I think, has to happen with security tools, right? You got to get it in people's hands, deliver delight, and because an interesting thing, I've spoken to a lot of CIOs, CISOs, CTOs, how do you pick the tools that your team is using? It's not, it was a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, right? That's a good cover your ass, but it's not the reason to pick a tool. People pick tools because they're paying these developers and security guys a small fortune to work there. And if you are going to pay someone $250,000 a year to develop code for you, what are you going to tell me? He has to use your tool when he's telling you this is the better tool for the job? So, that's fundamentally changing why you don't hire salespeople. You hire DevRel or community relationships and evangelists and stuff like this. So that's just my 2 cents and what I see.
No, it's again, like I said, I mean, I'm pretty sure about where, kind of SecOps is going and where security is going, the funding model, how that's all going to shake out, ultimately where the budget resides. Very much open questions. Very much.
Yeah. Mike, we're way past our time here. I don't think I've ever done one that ended early with you, but 15 years of doing this. Hey, man, you going to come back on soon, though?
I am.
All right, do a little homework on who's paying for it. Let's talk about that next time.
Yes.
All right.
I look forward to that.
Hey, but you know what we didn't do, Mike? People who want to get more information about DisruptOps.
DisruptOps.com. So, again, cloud security automation platform really focused on deputizing the operations people to give them the context and the information they need to fix the security issues that are found basically through a variety of different, tools and triggers.
Excellent, man. Good luck. Say hello to Rich Mogul and Jody and Brandy and everyone else at the DisruptOps team.
I will. Always a pleasure, my friend. We will chat soon.
Absolutely. Mike Rothman, president, co-founder DisruptOps here on TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, our Something Old today, again, goes back to TechStrong Con, where we have, 50 different sessions up there. And by the way, they're all still available at TechStrongCon.com. I believe they're also available on our Digital Anarchist platform. Today's TechStrongCon from the archives, though, is none other than Mitch Ashley. Of course, Mitchell will be on later in the show as well, as he does his Analyst Corner daily here. But Mitchell presented at TechStrongCon on something he calls strategic DevOps. And, you know, in Mitchell's world, in view, these strategic DevOps includes business acceleration of digital transformation, reliance on DevOps investments, cloud-native applications, and of course cybersecurity, all coming together and creating a new reality, if you will. It's a great presentation by Mitchell. I think you're going to enjoy it. So here's Mitchell Ashley from TechStrongCon on strategic DevOps.
Hi, and welcome to this talk on strategic DevOps, creating the next normals. I'm Mitch Ashley, CEO of Accelerated Strategies Group. We're an analyst firm focusing on DevOps, cloud, digital transformation, and cybersecurity, highly relevant to what's happening in today's world. So let's talk about disruption. We certainly are experiencing in that on many fronts, both tragically, economically, in our society, as well as in our personal lives. But there's some different ways to look at disruption. And while there certainly is pain that goes associated with, and not to understate the seriousness of what's happening in the world today with the health crisis, COVID-19, or even economic crisis and what that can mean for people's livelihood, it does create rebounds. I mean, with every downturn, there's always a rebound. At least that's been our experience in the US economy and economies throughout the world. So an economic downturn, while it certainly causes a lot of pains, feels painful, we know that there's a rebound, a future where we're coming out of that. And it may be coming into a different future, very different in some cases, but we know that there's a brighter side. There's some brightness coming. There's a light in the distance, and it's not a train. So as there's things that can happen in an economic rebound, things like entering or creation of new markets, expanding markets. We could experience new competitive opportunities as well as threats, competitors entering markets that they haven't been in before. Or maybe we do that. You do that in your own business. Might also have markets evaporating or reemerging under a completely new set of dynamics. Something I think we're all thinking about is what the hospitality industry looks like, conferences, things like that. Will they come back the same, or will they be different? Will people travel? If they do travel, will they stay overnight? When they want to stay somewhere, is a hotel or a current form of a hotel something they'll want to experience? Now, evolution and changes also happen throughout your career. I've certainly had that through mine and in my career. Whether it's jobs, it's products and services that I've worked on, even changing industries. I never would have expected I would have worked in cybersecurity when I started my career. More or less some of the cloud technologies that have been created and didn't exist when I first graduated from school. So that kind of evolutionary, sometimes radical change happens for startups. You can make big pivots. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story of my own in that vein, but it also can happen in enterprises. The enterprises can experience some pretty significant downturns. I know we're feeling that across our economy today, whether it's in automotive or even on the upside with healthcare and the demand for services and new services. Enterprises also have the advantage of longevity in seeing multiple cycles of things happening in the market and understanding of how to use that data or that experience in future downturns, or the current one for that matter. So there's advantages to coming from both environments, whether you are in more of a startup-ish or new small business organization, a young organization, or you're in a well-established enterprise. So just to share some of my experiences to kind of personalize this a little bit, as I look across my career, I've experienced some really important lessons, and I've gone through some economic downturns. And I think it's worth kind of looking back on a few of those and just talking about what things might be helpful to consider in our current situation. So before we get to DevOps and its role and the next normal, kind of the title of this talk, let me share some of those experiences. What I've found is the biggest disruptions, whether it's in my personal life or it's in business, the economy, whatever it is, the biggest disruptions also create the greatest opportunities. Now, maybe may sound overly optimistic, but that seems to happen as you kind of look back in history. And it's not only the source of opportunity, but it's also a way to look at the future and kind of remain positive with some confidence, knowing that there is a brighter side coming. There are brighter days going. And matter of fact, if you have a sense of being able to create the future, I think your outlook is even more positive because you're creating something but also you're creating something that you have a hand in, shaping, developing, meaning you're going to have a role to play in that as well, whether that be you personally or your organization. Just to use an analog here, I don't know if you've ever played that kind of childhood card game called 52 Pickup. I don't know if you recall that game or you played it, but if you haven't played it, it's pretty simple. The best person to play 52 Pickup with is someone who hasn't ever played, because you're probably only going to play it once. It's sort of a joke or a prank where you're asked, hey, you want to play 52 Pickup? Well, how do you do that? Well, you take a deck of cards, throw them up in the air, and then the other person is supposed to pick up the 52 cards, right? Lots of fun, great joke as all the cards fall to the floor. I'm not sure everybody that plays the other side of that actually picks it up, but it's an interesting analog, because in a situation where we have such major disruption, whether it be economic crisis, disruptive business models, innovative uses of technologies, or major changes in consumer behaviors, customer expectations, changes in unemployment, whether you be personally, your company, or the economy, that can be in a sense another variation or version of that game 52 Pickup. And one of the things that happens in that is the rules of the game change. Now, in the game 52 Pickup, you don't know the rules until you've played. Then you find out, oh, okay, those are rules I actually don't want to play by, or okay, good joke, I learned, I'll share that with the next person, unsuspecting person. But in those kind of changes or crises or disruptions that I talked about, economic crisis, business models, technology shifts, etc., really is what's happening is some of those rules, maybe all the rules, are drastically changing. Certainly expectations are changing from past experiences, but the rules may also be unknown. They may be unknown to you, maybe unknown to your business, maybe to all of us. I think that's the situation we're in right now. I don't think any of us have experienced anything like the pandemic that we're currently going through with COVID-19. And we don't know what the part or the role that the health crisis will play in our economic recovery, because we don't know what's going to happen with the health crisis. We don't know what kind of reinfections and hotspots and things like that will occur, and what the reactions may be by governments, as well as impacts to our own businesses and livelihood. So when those rules are unknown, or at least by you, your company, et cetera, they often have to be rewritten. Now, sometimes you don't get to rewrite the rules, but sometimes you can have a hand in that. And I think that's where there can also be a lot of optimism. So someone else may be rewriting the rules, but that oftentimes may be because they've reacted quicker, moved into the market, or changed the dynamics in the market as part of their recovery and response. So be thinking about that and how quickly you engage in kind of resetting the rules. So ultimately, rules are being rewritten, whether it be by competitors or you or governments, etc. All of those things, consumers, the customer, they are being rewritten. So make sure that you're part of rewriting those rules in whatever way that comes. And it may be in a small way, it may be in a very significant way. So let me share some examples of that through some of the prior downturns. One of the biggest ones I went through was 9/11. And after the economy kind of took its hit, there was a concern about safety. So there are a few parallels to what we're experiencing now. People didn't know if you could get on a plane. People didn't know if we were going to see other attacks in our country, in the US. We just didn't know. You didn't know if it was safe to go into work for a while. You didn't know what you should be spending money on because you didn't know what the economy was going to be doing after it took a hit. I mean, in 9/11, in the PC business, I think Apple's a good example of someone who took some action to help shape the future. It's easy to pick Apple, a very successful company, but there's some good lessons to learn there. I mean, worldwide shipments of computers, personal computers, laptops, et cetera, had declined. I think it was 4.6% over the prior year. In the US, the drop was over 11%. And Apple's response to that was, right in the middle of the economic crisis, was to double down on R&D. And they increased their spend roughly 8% of sales when they were at 5% prior to that. So almost doubled their R&D investment. Now, why do I point that out? Well, that's what led to the innovations around the iPod, the iTunes music store, of course, set the foundation for the iPhone, the iPad, the things that were to come. But that investment paid off because it's a great time to really, if you aren't seeing great returns from the external economy, build the internal economy of innovation and ideas and pursue those things to help you have an advantage. So as you emerge out of an economic downturn, you've got things that will propel you. And the more you understand about the customers in the market and match those things together with your innovations leads to great success. You know, one of the things that I also personally experienced, it was actually a little bit later in that process, I was a part of a young startup just prior to 9/11 in the data center colo space business. And we were struggling a bit figuring out our business model, but after 9/11, all business had stopped. And as I mentioned, much like COVID-19, people's safety was threatened in a different way. We weren't sure kind of what the new normal would be. Cybersecurity was a emerging and very hot area, really a few years later, but it was really just starting at that point around 2001, 2002. But all the momentum from the dot-com days, even with the dot-com bust, et cetera, really completely stopped at 9/11. We considered shutting down that business, returning some of the money to the investors because it just didn't look like we were going to have the runway to really figure out if we had the right product market fit for what we were doing. As part of that shutdown process, we did an inventory and to really see if there's anything worth keeping, noting, selling, holding on to, whatever it might be. Well, it turns out we ended up restarting that company months later as a network security product company, still secure, that I worked with and also worked with my co-founder, Alan Schimmel, who's CEO and a chief editor at MediaOps. That was based on the concept that was implemented in a Perl script that a network admin had created. He had an idea, sort of mother of invention, necessity is the mother of invention, wrote a Perl script to automate something, some network security processes, and that ended up being the foundation of an entire restart of a company. And we sold products to B2B as well as to government, both defense and non-defense, and turned out to be a successful pivot. Interesting experience that and lessons that you take away from that. Who would have guessed a Perl script would be the thing that restarts the company, gives an entire new focus and shifts from one industry to another, at least from data center and cloud-like services, early cloud services, to cybersecurity, which ended up being an even hotter area at that time. Also, that was a time of kind of golden era of open source, of the early era of open source, and look how that's transformed business models today. Also in the 2008 housing crisis, I was part of creating 2 product companies right in the middle of all that. While things were kind of, jobs are being shed, the economy's dropping, et cetera. And we're working on some new products that led to some success. And it eventually led to my taking a VP of IT, effectively a CIO-like job for an industry R&D consortium organization. So even in my own personal history, the controversy and things that happen, as well as looking at, great companies like Apple and what things that they do that help them propel them through a crisis, whether it be economic or otherwise. As we look in today's situation, we just reported recently that the top 3 hires that are in demand right now, of course, are frontline healthcare workers, trucking, delivery drivers. Number 3, software engineers. People are investing in software. People are increasing their investment in software. So while we may be shedding jobs, doing furloughs, et cetera, in some areas, software is hot, and it's going to remain hot as we move forward. So here's some things we continue through this process, and I'm no better predictor of the future than anyone else, maybe worse. But you can certainly listen to some of the best sources and minds that are trying to figure this out. And I know there's a lot of talk about the rapid rebound of our economy, sort of this, the V-shaped recovery. Some people call it more like the Nike swoosh. Like we'll be back in, the end of the year, first part of next year, things will be all back to where they were. Well, I kind of doubt that that's going to happen. Not because I'm a pessimist, but first of all, recoveries have always, at least throughout my career, taken much longer than 6 months to recover. I mean, these are things that take a few years, if not multiple, to fully really get back. There's a lot of discussion about the idea of a zigzag recovery or a W-shaped recovery, something that's more like a rolling series of slowdowns, recessions, recoveries, et cetera. And a lot of this is, of course, because of the unknown and the dynamic around the pandemic and the unprecedented nature of it and unpredictability. I mean, we're going to have probably flare-ups and hotspots, may have even heightened contagion areas that have had a ramp up of infections. Certainly that's been predicted by Dr. Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. He's certainly more knowledgeable about it than I am. And it makes sense as you look at kind of the behavior of virus and what folks think that will do. It's more likely that we may be in a fall or winter kind of situation where there's increase, maybe even because of the current protests and things that are happening in cities around the country. Today could also lead to some reinfections and hotspots. I mean, we certainly hope not, but hopefully with the use of PPE, that's helping. But we hope we don't have those, but it's very possible we will, maybe even likely that we will. It's whether it's fall, winter, or things that happen, hotspots from the protests. There's also consideration, though, that when those things happen, will we see more government actions, things like shutdowns? I mean, it's been extremely painful and impactful, stating the obvious here, of what the shutdown's done to the U.S. economy as well as economies across the globe. Do we really, that's the moral debate, right? Can we really afford to go through and do that again and shed more jobs and destroy the economic livelihood of people and businesses? Is it worth suffering the loss of life to keep the economy up and going? And not a debate I want to have here. Certainly not an easy answer to any of those things. From my standpoint, life comes first, and we work to that as the principle. But still, economic livelihood, that can cause some awful pain in folks' lives if they don't have, a source of income. But it's very possible we'll see shifts in personal behavior driven around personal safety as opposed to reactions from governments, or maybe in addition to. So we could be back in a situation where folks are not comfortable returning to a restaurant, or at least a restaurant as we knew it before COVID. Maybe restaurants have emerged out of this or will emerge with enough safety-driven precautions that consumers will still go there. Or the same could happen for retail. We may be back at the curbside delivery mode and online ordering of services, of goods, things like that. So it's very possible we'll have a cycle of actions and reactions and actions, depending on what happens with COVID. If it all goes well and the worst of it is over, I mean, that would be wonderful. I don't think strategically we can just assume that that's going to be the case. I mean, I had a boss once that called that happy years. You know, we only want to listen to the good news. And while we certainly hope something like that happens, we have to plan for other scenarios as well. There's also the consideration that economies across the globe are likely to recover at very different rates or different timing. You know, yes, we're a global economy, but because of the pandemic, it's had a different effect. I mean, look at Brazil, where it is today. We're talking in the May, June timeframe now, and where it was 2 months ago. It's kind of caught up with the US, unfortunately, in deaths and infection rates. You know, who knows what the next hotspot like that will be, right? And what that recovery of that country might look like, the economy, if we're selling goods and services to that part of the world. And in our business, we usually are. If you're in the product side of technology, software technology, cloud, et cetera, you're selling and working with businesses, customers across the world. I think we're also to see some lasting changes in personal behavior and how that correlates to customer expectations and changes in that. How we want to consume services, what we expect companies to communicate about how seriously they're taking personal safety, personal health safety, and what they're doing to protect us. I'm part of putting together some reentry plans. Just worked on a 5-phase plan, helping someone that I collaborate with on a 5-phase plan. And of course, anything past phase 3 and beyond is a guess, but a lot of it is driven around having a detailed enough plan that we follow, that people will trust that we're taking our precautions we're taking and the things that we're doing to take their personal safety. It's all being done seriously and adhered to. So the worst plan is one that's created but never taken seriously, because people will lose confidence very quickly in that kind of a plan. You would, I would, of course. So consumers, whether it's online, digitally, and the new kind of expectation that we have of services that we're getting and how that's delivered to us and what we expect from that, maybe bringing things from the physical world, expectations from the physical world into the digital world, certainly can change consumer behavior and their expectations on us, as well as the way physical goods and services or in-person goods and services are delivered. We also can not only have changes in the workplace, things we've talked about, remote work, but there could be, high innovation that occurs around that. There's discussion around how things like the metaverse, and I'll talk about this in a moment, but those digital experiences may carry forward post-COVID. I mean, imagine today we're reconnecting with families digitally, or connecting, maybe reconnecting with folks we haven't talked with in a while, because it's our only option. But you can easily imagine wanting to celebrate one of your kids' next birthday or grandchild's next birthday digitally if the grandparents can only join over Zoom or Team or whatever the product is that you're using. Or maybe you want to include someone that, now that you've kind of reconnected and rekindled that relationship with, Aunt Susan, or, your sister, Karen, or whoever it might be, you want to include them now and not require travel to be part of that celebration, whatever it is. Maybe it's a wedding, a birthday, some kind of a family event, or a life event for that matter. So, there's high innovation, and much has been made about Zoom and the, utility of that and how popular it's become, largely, I think, because of its ease of use. That's leading to what's now a Zoom Communications IPO. Well, great, wonderful for them. That's not the kind of innovation I'm talking about. That may be some wealth generation and a reinvestment in more innovation by that particular company. But we may have some things that are really different about how we interact with each other that we haven't even created yet. So in a zigzag economy or economic recovery, one of the things I think we have to expect is very quick startup or suspension of services in response to conditions. If you can imagine a restaurant, if we do have a hotspot or reemergence of a highly infected area, and maybe either because of consumer behaviors or because of governmental response, we may be back in the curbside delivery only. And maybe it's worse, let's hope not, but maybe it's worse than it is today. So we may have to step back in that zigzag, but also redesign what it means to be at that point because of new conditions, new knowledge, new learnings, and new expectations at that time. I mean, ultimately, many of us believe that what's happening now is we're experiencing an accelerated shift or push to the digital economy. Things like contactless payment services. I know I use that much more myself than I ever have. I had prior here and there. Now everywhere I can, I use contactless digital payment services. So at a minimum, some of the things that we're experiencing today that have become digital experiences will probably remain. First of all, because in a recovery through COVID and a health crisis, assuming that's not a flash cut, we're back to normal, which I think is a pretty safe assumption. A lot of those experiences that we're providing, services we're providing through a digital form are going to need to continue because there will be people, because of an age group, a high risk health concern, will not be able to re-enter and interact in large groups like others will. So we're going to need those digital services to many parts of the economy, maybe all of it. So that's where I get this idea of it's not the new normal, it's the next normal, or actually next normals, because we're going to have a series of what business, what our lives, what our economy looks like, rather than okay, we're going just to a next place and that's where it's going to stay for a long time. It could happen. I personally don't believe that's probably what we're going to experience. But one thing I know with any kind of change, I think we'd probably all agree upon is that the pace of change certainly is increasing. Situations like COVID, situations like economic crisis, even shifts in social justice, the things that are happening with protests around the world can lead to rapid and sustained, even increased pace of change. And with that big stimulus that happens at points and times in our lives, in our economy, and our businesses, that can cause big shifts for businesses, technology, even for our society. So I think the best way to prepare is not to return to a new normal or to one new normal, but think of a progression or a series of next normals, so plateaus ascending into the future, kind of steps leading us into the future that are occurring at a more rapid pace rather than just setting the foundation for the next decade of how we might work or what business looks like. So let's turn our attention finally to talk about DevOps and cloud, and also networks, the role of technology and that is and will play, of course, in our current day future, but also leading into the future of recoveries and beyond. So one of the things I like to say is now is the time for our investments in DevOps and cloud and technology to pay off. If not now, when? We need the speed, the agility, the ability to pivot, the ability to create and adapt products and services through software more than ever. It's what businesses have relied on for their digital transformation strategies. Well, guess what? That is the game. In most, if not all cases, software has a role to play, whether you're producing physical goods or soft goods, you're in the technology economy, whatever. And when the rules change, when the game changes, the cards are tossed up in the air, that creates huge opportunities. And that can emerge in several ways. It can emerge from necessity, things like contactless services, ramping up digital meetings and use of that for all kinds of purposes, in personal life, education, of course, conducting work, car companies and others building respirators, things like that we need just out of necessity to live, continue to operate and function in our businesses and society. The second is responsive, where we're making investments to fight COVID-19, find vaccines. You think about the massive investment that our governments are making, businesses are making, even third-party foundations, challenges that are happening all over the world to develop vaccines, new treatments, new personal protective equipment. I mean, you think of the things that you see on Facebook today that you didn't see 3 months ago. How many masks were they selling? How many Star Wars masks or whatever variation, personalized version of personal protective equipment was happening? Those are just simple examples. But those are responsive. Those are things that we can, because of the situation now, let's go attack that problem and the needs that are created around it. Now, speaking of created, the third is created. So those are situations where companies create new change, new opportunity through innovation that they create because of new needs. It may be the dynamics of what's changed in the market, the role chains of what's changed with customers, with our business, with competitors. So Alibaba, for instance, really was transformed back in 2003 during the SARS epidemic. We're looking at an epidemic example, obviously not as large as COVID, but that's when they launched their first consumer marketplace in a Chinese market during a self-quarantine time. Right place, right time, right idea, boom, huge impact on their future success. So whether it's emerging, responsive, or created, there are lots of opportunities that can come from great disruption. Now, I mentioned there are all kinds of things that we can see already happening in our environment. Just to give you an idea of things that can be happening, some of these may be relevant to your business, some of them may not be, but they may inspire some ideas or things that you're already working on that are creating opportunities, creating new innovations, and how we're leveraging DevOps and cloud and cybersecurity and even networks. There's a lot of investments happening now in robotic drug screening to help us more quickly evaluate the efficacy of drugs and how that helps with either combating or virus or whatever it is as part of medical treatments for people battling COVID. AI applied to drug discovery, using all the data that we've collected through all of these trials across multiple drugs, multiple instances of going through FDA approval processes, trials in the fields with patients, et cetera. Using AI to leverage the learnings from that, or testing what might be new drugs, whether current or new drugs, and how that might apply to helping health situations. So a lot of happening right now in this idea around the metaverse, which of course Fortnite got a lot of press about this, I think about 1.5 years ago, in their stated goal of, well, what they really want to do, it isn't just Epic Games to create a online massive player game, but they're really interested in creating this digital immersive experience. And we've had some of those in the past, and they've had, moderate success. But maybe there's some things happening to transform education, could transform the university experience. People are asking, why am I paying great sums of money if I'm not going to go to the university? I'm just going to take online classes. Or maybe things like rethinking in-person conferences. I mean, what we're doing today is with virtual events like this one, certainly a responsive reaction to here's what we need to do to be able to offer these and be participate in these kinds of events. How do we conduct the business that happens normally at conferences? I don't know about you, I don't go always for all the presentations. I'm often there conducting business, doing business development, meeting with customers, meeting with other people. A lot of other things happen. And there could be some new innovative ways of, and will be, I think, how that's created. As we return to office space, a return to kind of think about it as a more portable or work from anywhere kind of work environment, maybe hybrids of those things. What do office spaces look like? And the services that might come around that. Do you use a fully digital office space, kind of the digital replacement for office space? How about shifts to digital experiences for services, and of course using mobile and web applications, so maybe even relying on 5G and the expansion of that, especially in places where there may not be landline ISP services for high-speed data. Another area is just thinking of how we redesign, rebuild supply chains. When economic downturns happen, not everybody recovers. Not everyone in the supply chain might be recovering at the same time in the same way of what you need. You may want to build more flexibility and resiliency in your supply chain. That's one of the things that Cisco did, I believe it was with the 2008 housing crisis, is really look at, instead of one supplier for one product or technology, how could they have multiple suppliers who could all do different products within their portfolio? So if they needed to quickly shift between them, they had that flexibility. There's a lot of discussion about the rethinking of the value of work and what can be done digitally and what must be done in person, and what that does to the vulnerability of people and their livelihood and their safety. I mean, there's certainly innovation that could happen around that. Maybe even redefining jobs in some cases, or how we deliver those goods and services. Maybe walking up to a counter to order a sandwich is not how we're going to order food in the future. I don't know about you, I'm perfectly fine with ordering it from my cell phone and walking in the door to pick it up when it's ready, instead of hanging out in the restaurant, if I'm not going to eat there, for example. Also, the vulnerability of supply chains. I mean, we've seen that with food, with healthcare, with drugs and medicines, healthcare supplies, with masks or other PPE. There's opportunity, of course, there that can happen. One of the areas I always follow closely, partly because I enjoyed it, it's a hobby of mine, but a source of great innovation is around massive online game experiences, the Fortnites, the Overwatch, the WoW experiences. I can recall the time when I played games, but I discovered what was really happening inside WoW and the economy that had been created, people paying real money for effectively monopoly money, gold, character experience, etc. So they're departing real valuable money for something that's really nothing. I mean, it's a virtual something. And why is that? Why are people doing that? And then you see what the experience is and why that gain is valuable enough for people to part with their own hard-earned cash. That's a significant change. And there's huge shifts already happening in online gaming. It may be a great source, for example, to think about how we do meetings, how we do conferences, how we do large group experiences. Because today, I don't know if you follow Twitch or other platforms, certainly your kids do, more than likely. I mean, there are a huge audience and gamecasters who are the hosts of those, the announcers of those, really kind of sharing the insights and what's happening during an online gaming experience between two extremely qualified, extremely skilled players at a certain game. It might be Overwatch or StarCraft or something like that. That's a great source for innovation, taking ideas from those domains and say, well, how might that apply in what I'm doing if I'm offering services to businesses around office functions and design, things like that. One of the things that I think also is telling about what's happening too is there was a recent study commissioned by Cisco's AppDynamics. They acquired them a few years back and for application performance management to say, well, is this demand for DevOps and cloud and all this technology real? I mean, or is everybody just losing money out of their IT budgets and we're cutting back, and this is all sort of hopeful thinking. There's actually some real data that came out of that study I thought was really interesting around how organizations are accelerating their digital transformation and their priorities around that. So some of the responses to it were 81% said that COVID-19 created the biggest technology pressures they've experienced. 61% said they felt under more pressure than ever. Another 64% said asked to perform task activities never done before. Things are shifting. What the business is asking them to do is now changing. Like getting products out to market quicker, maybe doing things we haven't done, and how we've delivered software, or the kind of software that we are delivering. Things like sign-offs to get work, get agreement to have projects funded and work done is happening, excuse me, in weeks instead of years. And that the end result is projects that are completing in weeks and months. So it's pretty rapid. It's pretty interesting, and a data point or set of data points confirming that we're seeing that shift in businesses and the priorities around leveraging DevOps, software, cloud, and the technologies we can use this. So back to the idea of now's the time for DevOps. If not now, when? Thank you for indulgence while I drink my coffee here too. I think it's really time for us to flex our software capabilities, our muscles, if you will, for delivering software, but not just delivering, our ability to pivot, our ability to deliver more rapidly, our ability to remove roadblocks in and out of band of the software process. Maybe not be the software itself, maybe something happening in or around that. Could be in the software process also. But really focusing on making sure we're leveraging that or demonstrating to the organization what we can do through responsiveness of requests we're receiving, or demonstrating on our own, sharing the results that we're seeing through those investments. Let's hope we're seeing results from those investments. Also make DevOps a uniter. I've said this before in other talks. When DevOps got started, it was largely, one aspect of it was largely the message of, well, we don't need operations now because we're going to automate all that because developers don't like to do it and they should own the stuff that they deliver in production. Some of that has continued with us, particularly the ownership of, supporting what you create, much less so that jobs are going away, just like people who managed hardware and data centers are doing different jobs now. Same thing in operations and security. They've adjusted and shifted and now are working more collaboratively. And that's the key, I think, around DevOps is collaborative work and also shared learnings, right? It's about bringing the organization together and uplifting all of us in the process, because it certainly doesn't serve to use it as a divider. One of the things I think also an interesting part of our strategy for Day is thinking about empathy as a source for deeply understanding customers. The more you can understand what someone is going through, the challenges that might be associated with that, and understand how the creation or delivery of what you do can be realigned, redesigned in a way that makes life easier for them. It delivers a better experience. Satya Nadella's Microsoft CEO is a great source for this message, and he talks about how health challenges with his son has really helped him understand how the role technology plays and how changing how it's delivered and being empathetic about that really can make a huge difference. Next on my kind of list of priorities in this time of DevOps, and DevOps as a strategic enabler, is realigning our goals and outcomes and doubling down on creating software. First of all, digital transformation, of course, can be an offensive strategy. It can be a defensive strategy as well. In much the ways that I talked about responding to opportunity previously. Now, in the current situation, we should have been doing this anyway, but in the current situation, if you can't connect the dots between your software team, between your product team, your IT organization, part of the organization, to the business strategy and goals, whether it be through KPIs, objectives, whatever that might be, it's time to realign or risk defunding or even existence of what you're doing in the organization. Because in tough times, the things that aren't critical are the things that either aren't delivering now or essential, vital, important to our future. They're at risk. Why are we doing that? Other things need that funding that are going to help us grow, survive, whatever that may be, where you are in that kind of life cycle. So I would be very concerned if you can't paint that picture very clearly. It doesn't mean you have to be word for word. This is the goal of the business strategy, so our goal is that goal. I mean, how are you fulfilling that? And how is your delivery of that essential to meeting that business strategy? So if key to the current situation is our market's disappeared, we don't think it's going to come back, we need to go after what's re-emerging, what we think will emerging. Maybe we don't know what those scenarios are yet. Great, let's design for multiple of those. How would we deliver on each of those? Build your goals and your thinking, your strategies around being able to do that, just as one example. I think another place that we have a huge opportunity is leveraging the mass sources of data that we've accumulated. We have huge amounts of data about our software process through the automation and DevOps tools, tool chain, workflow processes. That data is very valuable to understand what's happening and how we can make it more effective, increase the speed of it, reduce errors, security issues, whatever it might be. We've got the same data in our businesses now. What's the interaction of customers been, of our services through digital interactions? What's the historical data that we have that's part of our, data lakes, data mines, whatever it is? Those are all places for discovery. What data do we have, mining of that data, and even application of AI and machine learning to that. I mean, one of the things machine learning benefits from, I've learned from the experts I've been able to hang around, is the reason machine learning is possible, what's really valuable to machine learning is massive amounts of data. That's how it effectively learns, rather than just pure algorithmic learning, such as an expert system or things that I worked on earlier in my career. There's huge opportunity there. And you may have insights through that data. And there's even consortiums now. Lockheed has formed a consortium in the aerospace industry of multiple parts of the ecosystem, anonymizing and desensitizing data to be shared across different organizations to try to understand and help develop scenarios or predict what outcomes might be for economic recoveries in different parts of the world. Interesting collaboration through data. Maybe there's something you might create a collaboration inside your company as well as outside. Maybe it's just leveraging something you have but you didn't know you had, or you haven't been using, which also goes kind of to the next thought of great time to redesign processes, eliminate things that aren't bringing value, automating some things that truly could have been automated, and now's a good time because of conditions or technology has changed, or as we're going after a new digital experience, a new product or service, a new market, whatever it might be. Of course, let's automate it to start with instead of doing it like we've done it before. Great time to rethink those things. So as we kind of wrap things up here, just want to encourage all of us to think about opportunity or disruption, not just as a negative thing, but as opportunity, maybe big opportunity, and being respectful of the human crisis that's happening, whether it's in protests around the world around injustice to sections of our society, or it's economic crisis, health crisis. Those are all have human tragedy associated with it. So I say this in the most respectful way, in understanding that all of us, all of you, are experiencing that in some way, maybe very personally to you and your family. So if so, I hope things emerge well for you and a brighter day is coming. Keep that up, big opportunity idea. What is your big opportunity or big innovation or source of ideas to go find those innovations? Where are they in your organization or in your work or in your life? Think about disruption as, okay, other people had good outcomes from difficult times. What can ours be? What can mine be? And as software, your ability to create or maybe even already respond to shifts in the business. Are you ready? Are you there yet? Do you need to double down? What do you need to double down in? Even if you're there, maybe you need to still create some capacity or areas that you haven't gone after yet. Maybe serverless is a thing that's potentially very valuable to your kind of a business because of how its event-driven nature might drive transactions on the edge of the network. Who knows? I don't know your business, of course, but you do, or you can look at those things, ask yourself those questions. And where can innovation occur, whether it's emerging, responsive, or created? Think about those three kind of categories of ways to at least to segment, think through certain ideas to see what can be helpful, might emerge of new ideas that you can help create new innovations to create. And as we pursue this journey together, because we are on it together, we're all in the same boat, the planet Earth, our global economy, our regional economies as well. I wish you the best on your DevOps journey. And I hope the things we've talked today about how to look at opportunities and see the positive side of it, how to look at why innovations occur in its responsive, emerging or created nature might help you think about how you can leverage DevOps and how you can also double down and demonstrate the real value of software, DevOps, the cloud, the role of cybersecurity, of networks, 5G, ISPs, Wi-Fi, all of those things are critical to our future. So I wish you the best on your DevOps and software journey. As we part, just like to say, be safe, be well, and be careful out there. Have a good day.
Okay, hope you enjoyed Mitchell's presentation from TechStrong Con. Now it's that time of the day where we do our news headlines roundup from the Media Ops neighborhood sites. Let's start with DevOps.com. We have 5 project management skills every developer should have. You know, and make no mistake, project management, product management, these are important aspects still of what we do in dev and DevOps. So good article there. How a product-centric, speaking of project to product, how a product-centric model can change power utilities. And that's an industry that's probably ripe for some change in how we're doing apps there. And then we have GitLab publishes their ROI report. It's a decent report. Go check that out. It's interesting findings. And then from the DevOps mainframe space, we have Dynatrace extends Azure integration. And good stuff coming from our friends at Dynatrace. Over on Container Journal, Feedstock aligns with Red Hat on containers. You know, Red Hat and OpenShift is becoming a container powerhouse there, so good stuff. And then security, over on the Boulevard, on Security Boulevard, we have, is cyber insurance worth it? You know, I know a lot of people have been disappointed when they had to make a claim, but I know other people who swear by it. So check out the article and you can kind of draw your own conclusion. And then the deception in Cloudflare's ownership. No, I'm reading this article wrong. I apologize. It's the deception in, you know what? I can't read it up on our board, and I apologize, and I forgot what article it is. We're going to skip that one. We're going to go to Ivanti extends Qualys Alliance. And, you know, Qualys, with their recent announcements in endpoint security as well as VMDR, vulnerability management, smart move by Ivanti to align themselves with them. So that'll be the news for today. Now it's time to head on over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor, who has a great interview and webinar preview today for the rest of the week. So Charlene, take it away.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, managing editor at Media Ops, and I am here now with Paolo Shikarian, who is co-founder and CEO of a company called Cyrecon, which does AI threat, not detection, but prediction, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Wanted to make sure I had it right. Thanks so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today, Paolo. I appreciate it.
No, happy to be here, Charlene.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what your company does and really what AI and threat prediction, what that means, especially in relation to just cybersecurity in general. So maybe you can kind of start out by telling me a little bit about your company.
Yeah, so it really began with some R&D that was funded by the Director of National Intelligence here in the U.S., and my co-founder and I led a research group that was on this government-funded project. And the idea was, can we take hacker discussions from places like social media and the dark web and other places which have that kind of information, blogs and so forth, and use it to predict the activities of malicious hackers? The idea being that if you can understand the types of cyber weapons they're developing, you can then go ahead and take more preventative action and avoid attacks altogether. So the way we do this is with the combination of data mining, so gathering information from these threat intelligence sources, and machine learning, taking all that data from those different communities and using it to make a prediction. And the place we apply this is to predict which vulnerabilities will be used by hackers in an attack. And this has a couple of key use cases. So first, we have a lot of clients whose vulnerability management team uses this to do a better job of vulnerability management. This is an enormous problem in the industry. And we're also seeing usage in the DevSecOps community as well.
That's great. That's great. And I love the idea of being proactive about security rather than reactive. So, you said data mining makes is a large part of it. Does that mean that only companies that deal with a ton of data on a regular basis are able to use this technology, or is it something that really could be used by any size company? Paul, are you there? This is just not my day. All right, we're back. Okay, all right. So I love the idea that this is kind of a proactive approach to security rather than reactive, and I imagine that a lot of companies are, seeing this as kind of the next big thing in security. But because of the amount of data that's involved, is this something that really only larger companies can take advantage of, or is this something that perhaps through data lakes of just data everywhere that even smaller companies might be able to take advantage of this?
Yeah, it's more of the latter. We see a very wide applicability of the technology. And the reason being is the impetus toward using is not how much data you have, but the size of your attack surface. And so based on either the results of your vulnerability scan, so if you're seeing thousands of vulnerabilities on a regular basis, or the what you're doing in your DevSecOps practices, your chances are you're seeing a lot of vulnerabilities, and you need to triage and determine which ones you need to mitigate that could pose the most risk. That's where Cyrecon comes into play. The data we collect is expansive, but it's from the hacker community. And so for a given user, you're actually using only the portion of that data that's relevant to you. But on your own, it would be tough to gather that by yourself.
Got it. Okay. All right. So where does this fit in a company's kind of security footprint then? Is it just kind of just one of many different tools that they're using, or does this replace another existing tool?
So our solution is complementary to the existing vulnerability management setup, because what we're finding, even with large customers, is that what they're using for vulnerability management is insufficient. It does a great job of detecting the vulnerabilities, but it's not as helpful in determining which ones they need to remediate. And with every customer we've worked with, we've actually identified what are called ignored threats. An ignored threat is where you have a software vulnerability that there is a significant threat associated with it, but you've decided not to take action because maybe you weren't aware of the threat. The classic case is the Equifax breach. They knew about that Apache Struts vulnerability prior to the breach occurring, and they made a decision not to mitigate. Right. Cyrecon comes into play to shine a light on where those mitigations should take place to avoid near-term threats.
All right. So does it rank those those vulnerabilities as levels of severity, if you will?
Yeah, and it's a little bit different ranking because one, the ranking is determined by a machine learning algorithm that's comparing the data it mined from the hacker community with what has actually been exploited. And so what it gives you is what's called what we call our Cy rating score, which is in technical terms a relative likelihood. So when you see something scored at, say, 30, you know that vulnerability is about 30 times more likely to be used in an attack than average. And this is very useful information because now companies can start to move toward a more risk-based approach to vulnerability management and prioritize based on where the most likely threat actor course of action lies.
Interesting. All right. So if organizations are using your technology, how do they have it? Is it an on-prem kind of a solution that they add, or is it a software subscription based, or how do you guys offer it?
It's a fully SaaS-based solution, and the information is provided through both a REST-based API as well as a graphical user interface. And the reason it's SaaS-based is what's going on in the hacker community as well as the world of vulnerabilities is constantly evolving. So we need to make sure to get our clients the most timely and accurate information possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I've been hearing a lot about AI in cybersecurity in general, but I wonder if obviously there are a lot of companies who use the term AI and ML, and they're not actually doing it in the the traditional sense. And they just kind of add a little widget and say, "Yeah, we're doing AI now." So, are we still kind of at the maybe bleeding edge of using AI in cybersecurity threat detection and prevention?
I would say definitely yes. I think that there are a bunch of solutions out there that are using AI more on the detection than that, and we're looking at AI used in a more preventative manner. And there's very few solutions on the market that are doing anything preventative with AI. But our belief and why we started the company is that this is where cybersecurity needs to move, because when you look at cost of breach and cost of defenses, the cheapest possible defense is to be very precise in defending against where the bad guys are going. And so if every time a bad guy is trying to do something, they find it just doesn't apply to me because I've already mitigated that risk, that's really the best defense. But you got to have the infrastructure to do that proactively, and that's where AI comes in.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to the days when AI is just a ubiquitous tool in the cybersecurity framework, and all companies have access to this type of information and threat prediction, as you say. So, Paula, thank you very much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me about your company, about AI and threat prediction. I look forward to having future conversations with you.
All right. Thank you, Charlene. I appreciate it.
All right. Okay, everybody, please stay tuned. We've got more TechStrong TV coming up, so stick around.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I am here with the Tuesday edition of the webinar preview. We have lots of webinars happening this week and next week on DevOps.com and Security Boulevard. Lots of great topics, so hopefully there'll be a couple here that pique your interest. You can always find more information on our webinars at DevOps.com/webinars or SecurityBoulevard.com/webinars. All right, kicking off today's webinar preview is one that is happening tomorrow, Wednesday at 11 a.m. on DevOps.com. It's called DevOps is the Key to Differentiation. This one is being sponsored by Progress, and Alan Santos of Progress is going to be speaking with our very own Alan Schimmel about the value of DevOps and how organizations can sell that value to their executive suite to secure budget for new initiatives. And then Progress is also going to be talking about its role in improving the state of DevOps analytics. So hopefully you guys can join us for that one. Again, that one is happening Wednesday, August 5th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. The second webinar I want to let you guys know about today is called Immutable Security for Immutable Infrastructure. This one is happening on Security Boulevard. It's sponsored by Accurix, and it's happening Wednesday, August 5th also. This one is at 1 p.m. Eastern. And it really talks about how as organizations increasingly adopt the containers, serverless, service mesh, and other cloud native technologies, how they go about securing that new infrastructure, this called an immutable infrastructure, that's got to be changing as well. So the folks at Accurix are going to be talking about how organizations can secure this new immutable infrastructure with a new approach called immutable security. They're going to talk about the practice of it, the concept of it, how organizations can adopt an immutable security strategy. So definitely one worth checking out if you are increasingly using cloud native technologies. Again, this one is happening Wednesday, August 5th at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. All right, the final webinar that I have for you today is happening Thursday, August 6th at 1 p.m. on DevOps.com. It is called How SLOs Enable Fast, Reliable Application Delivery. This one is jointly sponsored by AppDynamics and Blameless. The gentleman from AppDynamics and Blameless are going to be talking about how organizations can adopt a collaborative approach to implementing service level objectives. So their software teams and leaders alike will have what they call a shared language approach to better focus their engineering efforts and increase the customer experience. They'll also be sharing a case study, and they've got a pretty nifty demo on tap as well. So definitely one worth checking out. Service level objectives is something that every organization has to deal with on a regular basis. So definitely if you're having any issues with your service level objectives, or if you just want to improve on them, this is definitely a webinar worth checking out. All right, everybody, that is the end of today's webinar previews. Please check in on Thursday for the Thursday edition for the webinar previews, where I'll go over some more of the upcoming webinars that we have both on DevOps.com and Security Boulevard. Until then, please stay safe.
Hey, everyone. Okay. Thanks, Charlene, for a great interview and for the webinar preview. Now it's time to head over to the Analyst Corner with Mitch, where, as I mentioned earlier, Mitch has my friend Tracy Reagan. Tracy, of course, is the CEO, co-founder of Deploy Hub, as well as the community-appointed board member on the CD Foundation. And it's always a great interview with Tracy because she's smart, she's technical, and she understands kind of what the developer's dilemma is and DevOps dilemma is when it comes to CD and what tools they're using and everything else. Anyway, enough gushing about Tracy Reagan. I'm sure you'll see it in this interview by our friend Mitchell Ashley of Accelerated Strategies Group.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, I'm joined by Tracy Reagan, who is CEO and co-founder of Deploy Hub. Great to talk with you, Tracy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always a privilege, really it is.
Well, the privilege is definitely mine, so I appreciate you saying that. You and I have been on a couple panels here recently, and that's more of where we've gotten to know each other, I think, through some of those panels.
Yeah, those are fun, right? That's fun. I like doing them.
I do enjoy that. And you learn different things about people that way, because it usually just I don't know you. Now we're having this discussion. I'm getting all kinds of ideas and thoughts and how you feel about things, at least for an hour and a half. So it's a kind of a deep dive into the pool, and then we're back out and talk again.
Yeah.
So you and I have talked a lot since, and I'm glad to be meeting with you. So for folks that don't know Deploy Hub, we're going to be talking about one of your recent announcements or release. Just give folks an idea of who Deploy Hub is. We'll go from there.
Yeah, so Deploy Hub is a configuration management and deployment solution that's specific to a microservice or cloud native architecture. There are a lot of differences between monolithic and microservices, and the starkest is the difference in the way we manage and assemble applications and release them. Our old ways don't work too well.
Mm-hmm.
And everything, when you really think about compiling, building an application, and releasing an application, at the core, at the heart of it is the configuration. What source code did you use when you compile it? And then when you deploy it, it's where did you deploy it to? What were the environment variables? What are the parameters? So there's all these little pieces and parts, even in monolithic. When you go to microservices, that just explodes. It's just like there's so much stuff. You build all these little containers. All this stuff has to be put together. So it's like in the monolithic, we had a nice big puzzle and we put it together. We carefully took it from dev, test to prod. And microservices, we ripped apart the puzzle and now we're just taking one piece at a time. So it's a scaling issue. It really is a scaling issue.
Think of it like the difference between an airliner and a flock of drones. It's any one of them can go, they can be synchronized and go wherever, whatever can happen. Maybe that's
exactly.
Or not.
Exactly.
What do you think is it that? What is the sort of first thing you have to get past moving from monolith kind of thinking architectures? Maybe you've been in that for a while. That's probably not unusual to implementing a microservices containerized or architecture.
So, I could jump down and get really technical, but I think that the first thing to do is to think about our behaviors and our patterns. I think that we're all learning new behaviors and patterns in many different ways right now. That seems to be the theme for 2020.
In lots of ways, yeah.
Uh-huh. And so in monolithic, we have to think about, we have the luxury of time in monolithic. Time was on our side. Some companies have really achieved a process where they can do continuous deployments, meaning that a small change gets fixed, compiled, gets pushed through the CD pipeline, everything's automated, it goes out to production, that's going at a fairly fast rate. But that's not the majority of companies. The majority of companies still have the luxury of time, meaning that maybe they do a deployment once a day. That's a lot for most companies. But more than likely once a week or once a month, or even less frequent. So when we had the luxury of time, we scripted a lot. We like to say that we automate because we have a CD pipeline, but the CD pipeline calls a whole lot of scripts. It's really a big scripted process, and it's very static. So that's the first thing we have to stop.
Seems like to what you're pointing to is sort of an all or nothing mentality, right? You have to bake the whole thing, do all the testing, go through the whole QA process. I'm not saying every test in the world is run, but you're dropping the whole, code base, if you will. Well,
if you think about it, even if we did it once a day, let's just take that. Okay, if we did it once a day, a deployment, most builds, let's say, take maybe 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours for a really big company. And I know companies who have 8-hour builds, but let's just say 2 hours for a big company. That can be done in a day. Testing, depending on how thorough the change requires, if you're doing some level of functional testing, you can get testing done at a kind of functional level, functional points based on what you know from you had a bill of material report from your build, you compared it from the last build, you saw your differences, that got passed off to the testing team. They did functional testing based on what those changes were, and this is all agile, right? Because we're thinking in terms of incremental, and then get an approval for a release. You can pretty much do that in a day. Even with scripts. But can you do that 150 times in a day?
Oh, that's a huge leap. That
is the difference.
Yeah.
That, in essence, is the difference between a monolithic mindset and a microservice mindset. And we are still, I've been on this my entire career. Basically, I've been on this bandwagon of let's be unscripted, because a scripted environment is really still very static, and it's really quite still manual, and you still have somebody managing those static scripts. That can't happen anymore. We really have to let go of we have to become unscripted, and we really have to think about separating the data from the definition, and being able to scale to hundreds of releases of small components in a day, and understand what that looks like. That is the first place to start when you think about the bigger picture.
When you take away the scripts, what is the things that maybe it doesn't replace it exactly, but what are the things that now come into play? Is it more configuration driven rather than script driven, or what?
Well, I think we are going to see more tools. I mean, we've all understood the importance of job scheduling because we learned about CI, right? I mean, a lot of developers, they knew what a job scheduler was, but they never used it in their own private environments. So tools like Jenkins came along, or Hudson at the time, and said, you guys have your own job scheduler. You don't have to do this, follow this Word doc and do everything manually. Let's just let the Word doc do it for you. But that was in a very specific, development environment. That's what job scheduling is. So we have automation around workflow orchestration. Let's start thinking about other tools that we can automate. What can we automate in the process that is really beyond what a script does for automation? And I think the community as a whole, has to start looking at that, not just one part of it, not just test automation or security scanning automation. It's got to be, how do we scale to the kind of requirement that we're going to have to adjust to when we're pushing 100 changes across the pipeline in a day, or 500 changes. To really meet business agility, nothing should be static. Our production environment should be like a transformer. It shouldn't be it's going to be lots of pieces, little Lego sets, but that when it gets to production, we have to think about all of this as something that's shifting and changing at all points in time. It's sort of like one of my favorite movies. Now I can't think of the name of it. What was the movie called?
Who was in it?
I can't think of his name either.
Okay.
He played Jake. I don't know. It'll come to me.
You'll think of it.
They had these really cool images. They had these really cool images where they were doing battles, and the world was shifting constantly. Like the street would shift, and they were like transforming this. And when I saw it, it was like, that's our new production environment.
I can just imagine about 10 movies that might be actually. Not Doctor Who. About the doctor who got in a car accident and hurt his hand. Oh, Dr. Strange you're talking
Dr.
about.
Strange.
There you go. Sorry,
thank you. Yes, Dr. Strange. I loved all those scenes. They were beautiful awesome, because it showed a world that was constantly transforming, and nothing, we came from a Buddhist perspective, right? And nothing is really what it is. Nothing is what we see it to be. And that's what microservices is doing to our production environments. We saw this production environment as a static thing, right? This thing that hardly ever changes, and we have gatekeepers to make sure it doesn't change. Microservice says that's maybe not the best way to go about things. We should be pushing things out to get new innovation out to customers as quickly as possible.
Right. And those You're not going to get a lot of the benefits, right? If you apply that old paradigm to the new paradigm, new world.
And thank you for reminding me Dr. Strange was it.
Dr. Strange, great. Well,
it's a great movie.
Cumberbatch,
Yeah, that's right. Benedict was in there.
My family, and I have an actor in the family, and well, just, he's a hunky guy, I guess.
He is a hunky guy, but I really love that movie.
It's a great movie.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump to the announcement that you just recently had. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so in this moving from a static world to an ever-changing world, we've got our new release of Deploy Hub out. It took us some time to do it. We really backed off on it and said the tool was really, we had to have a come to Jesus moment, so to speak, and say the tool had too many mouse clicks. So we sat and looked at how we could reduce mouse clicks and how we could make this easier. Because, configuration management and deployments and releases is not easy. And our goal is to create a SaaS environment where you have a reverse proxy that gives you some protection, and everything you do is simple. How do we make deployment simple in a world that's ever changing?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we have a back end that simplified the moving pieces, but our front end didn't make it easy for someone to consume it. So we spent a lot of time. 9.0 came out just after 4th of July.
Mm-hmm.
As a result of that, we launched our Ortelius open source community.
Saw that.
We have about 59 people in the community who want to really contribute and become I call them the map makers, because in essence, what we're doing is we're mapping microservices to the logical application and trying to keep track of those configurations as they change. So yeah, we're really excited. It's been a really good shift. We've gotten a lot of good feedback on the new release. I'm very excited about it because I can actually demo it and take a deep dive if I needed to. And before I would be like, okay, guys, I can't figure out where that particular feature is. I don't know why we have it buried. And that was the same response our customers were getting. So we're pretty excited that that's done.
You know, having been as an entrepreneur going through multiple companies and building products from scratch, let me describe this, and I'm wondering if it's maybe an element of what you were facing early on when, you've been around for a while, so you're not like just, launched your first version or anything. But when engineers, software developers don't know what exactly the end user needs or the best way to implement it, oftentimes they'll implement flexibility into the product, which means more ways to do the same thing, options. So, hey, it's a Swiss Army knife now. You can kind of do what you need to do. And when I've done user testing in products like that I've built, the users go, well, if you can do something one way and you can do it a second way, there must be a reason why they're different. Which way do I do it when you intended it just to be flexible? There's those kinds of too much.
Well, that's interesting that you would define that, because that's happened in the old version and that just made it more complex. So I sat down and, based on user feedback, and I basically took out anything. If we saw something that could be done in 2 or 3 different ways, we took it out and we addressed that problem. What was the reason why we had to keep trying to find a different way to do that? And the reason was because we had already made it overly complex, and just creating more options made it even more complex. So all of that came out. So I took out a lot of the complexity and the options in order to make it more streamlined. Just give me one way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need, I get frustrated sometimes when if I use a map and it'll have all these different options. It's like, just tell me the fastest way.
Exactly.
I don't want to think about it. I'm driving. Just tell me where to go.
I learned that lesson early in my career. Not that I applied it, but I learned that lesson early in my career in the banking industry when we kind of went through a design, and it was great at handling any situation. And the smart person, experienced person in the room said, no, you're making everybody pay the penalty for the exceptions. I think that rule how you want them to do it, right? Or
I think that 80-20 rule has always been a good rule.
Mm-hmm.
You solve the problem for 80% of the customers, and if you lose 20, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if those 20 have such a complex environment, you don't want to build a solution to fit that 20. We were trying to do 100% in our old version, and I really have just had the team look at the 80%, make it simple as possible, because we want it to be easy. We want people to be able to move to a microservice platform and still have the visibility of what their application looks like, even though something underneath the covers may have changed and they don't know that until it doesn't work the same in production. How do they know? We want to be able to get that kind of feedback. So the risk in microservices is reduced.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like some really good lessons from customers and from the field too, to help shape that thinking to help simplify it.
Absolutely. Our customers were really great. And I have to give them credit. They have had to, we're a startup, we're the product's new, and they've been great in terms of giving us feedback, so kudos to all of them. I appreciate them all.
That's something also you learn doing startups is people really like to help you create your product. They love to give you feedback. Sometimes it's critical, which is fine. But, if you ask them for help, almost always they're happy to help and tell you what they think and, understand more, help you understand more about them. It's actually one of the funnest parts of building a company, building a product.
Oh, I love doing product management. It is fun. And that's why I like open source. Because in essence, that's what open source is doing. It's saying, let's get everybody involved in this solving this problem, not just not just us. It's not just our problem to own. It's everybody's problem to own. So let's open it up and bring everybody in. And that's why we started Ortelius. We have about 80% of the code base of Deploy Hub is in the Ortelius open source. The 20% is really just the features that an enterprise would need.
Enterprise, yep. That's a very common way to do it. I think a very understandable way to do it, because those are some of the kind of specific to enterprise, sometimes even more demanding requirements.
Yep.
Maybe the 20% for everybody else, but it's in the 80% for the enterprise.
Yep.
Good way to think about it.
Yeah.
Just a quick question about the times we're in. You kind of referenced it before. How's the current economic? I hate to bring up the economy and COVID and all that kind of stuff. How's that changed your business at all?
Well, we have, there's a few that have slowed down on moving up from what we call a pro user all the way up to an enterprise user. Mm-hmm. So that's been kind of a bummer. I don't think that they're gone forever. I feel like they will come back. The last announcement showing our GDP, how it tanked, that is a very scary thing, because, companies will they'll start retracting, and they'll start, holding the money, tighter to their chest, and not want to spend it because they don't know where that's going. And ironically, that's really a good thing for open source.
One side of the business benefits greatly, the other, okay.
Yeah. So open source and, kind of low cost point products do really well in an economy that's shrinking. When there's plenty of money, companies have less problem writing a check for $200,000. So we fit more into the open source and a more of a freemium model with a consumption model. So I feel like if we just stay the course, keep doing what we're doing, that we will in the long run be fine. I really do. And the other thing is, with COVID, what COVID has taught us is a new way of living. And that living does require the ability for companies to scale. Mm-hmm. And when they have these statically built environments, even if they containerized an application and they're trying to replicate one big fat container over and over and over, they're finding out that it's a very expensive way to go. Mm-hmm. So I think that a lot of companies have thought about now the cost of scaling in a monolithic kind of style, even if it is running in a Kubernetes cluster, because it's one big fat container. They're starting to think about microservices more, because at the beginning of the year, I was excited to get 2 or 3 discovery calls, and now I'm doing about 5 a day.
Wow.
That's
a great sign, actually.
Yeah, and these are people just, there's this kind of perception I have. Sometimes I talk to people from the neck up. Mm-hmm. Meaning they're thinking about it. They're not ready to buy, but they're thinking about the problem and how to solve it. And then there's a handful that I'm talking to them from the neck down, where it is hitting them right at the gut, that they've made some mistakes and they've got to figure out how to correct them. And so I think that I'm seeing a lot of from the neck up. But I think that from the neck up, when it comes to new projects and the economy picking up, they're going to be pushing a microservice architecture.
That way. What's your philosophy about running the business during economic times like this? Not that there's a rule book or a prescription for it, but what do you tell your company? Here's our approach.
Well, we're a small company, so I don't have to be too concerned about having discussions with employees. But we've gone through something similar. I have had to take companies through something similar. We did go through the horrible recession of 2007, 2008. And in any of those cases, we have done everything we can. We didn't lay off we spent a lot of money out of our savings, but we didn't lose a single person during that time. Now, we always, during that period, I think it felt different. There was always a belief that there was nothing that was holding the economy back from kind of getting back in line. I think there was, but we got back in line pretty quick. There was a few governmental changes and things got back in shape. With COVID, it's just scary. There's a lot more uncertainty with a pandemic than there is with a financial crisis. Because there's ways to correct a financial crisis, but can the government continue financing everybody to live through a pandemic? And when you see that the United States is not capable of managing a pandemic, how long we're just going to have to float with this until there's a vaccine. So I think that uncertainty is worse for the economy. And I don't know what I would be doing if I had a whole lot of people that I had to, make sure they were covered. It would be a very difficult time.
I'm kind of in the same situation where I don't have a, cast of 100 people or something that in our company that I'm running. You bring up some really good points, both about the U.S. and I think another, fundamentally the virus is out of our control, right? I mean, we can do some response to try to reduce it, et cetera. And your point about the U.S. is well taken. The other is, yes, economies kind of move and change differently during an economic crisis across the world. In this case, I think that virus is the sort of the center of the problem. The recoveries are going to be very different, I think, based on what the U.S. has done to try to prevent or not, what other countries have done. You could have booming economies in other parts of the world where we're still struggling or vice versa.
Exactly. And to that point, in my discovery calls, I have been speaking to a lot of people in Europe and in India, and they're still kind of cranking along. You speak to the people in the U.S. and you can feel that the uncertainty is far greater than I recognized it to be in 2007.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've had calls recently with a few folks from Mumbai who said, I can't do the call because we're moving out of the city and I'm going to wherever, and we don't have good internet access where my folks live on the, in the farm or whatever. So there's some interesting pointing out the infrastructure issues in different companies.
Yes.
If you will, we don't have ubiquitous broadband here either. I know that's a topic.
No, we don't either.
Another conversation. You and I have chatted off and on to turn the subject. Is it okay to continue topics here a little bit? Yeah. You and I have chatted off and on about women in tech and what the kinds of things that we can do to help really make it much easier, help people attain those kind of achievements in their career, and not just women, but also, of course, people of color. I mean, I've talked about Black people too. In tech, it's just not a lot of folks. Frankly, I feel pretty ashamed about what a poor job we've done it. But before I kind of castigate myself about it, I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah.
Your journey to tech.
So, I've got some years on me. I might not look like it, but I do. And when I went into technology, I was not the only woman. I went to a Star East show, and there was a woman by the name of, I think her name was Angie Jones, and she did a really fabulous presentation on women in tech. And she did it based on advertisements. So she went back and she had advertisements from Vogue and Cosmo magazine, where there were ads with women in the 50s sitting in their adorable shoes and really cute skirts, sitting at a mainframe.
Mm-hmm.
We think about
Cleaver in front of a mainframe, right?
Basically, yeah, June Cleaver in front of a mainframe, and she showed that. She showed that how women were the computers in the beginning, and they were always in the back room. They were doing the filing, the organizing, because that is what they were perceived to be doing, and so they were the ones that were running the mainframes. They were the ones that were in technology. And then she showed an interesting shift sometime around the 80s. And she showed commercials from the 80s. One was a boy sitting at a TRS-80. And his little sister was standing behind him watching, not on the computer, but watching. And the dad would come in and show him a skateboard, and he nodded his head, and showed him a basketball, and he nodded his head. He showed him a football, he nodded his head. He brought in the keys to the car, and he nodded his head. So these were and then she showed things like Weird Science, the movie Weird Science, where boys are creating the perfect woman. And she showed how there was a shift in targeting and marketing computers to boys and not to girls. And so and she literally showed how in the 80s, she did research on how many men and how many women were graduating in IT at that time, and the numbers for women were way low. So something happened between 1950 and 1980. I graduated right in the 80s timeframe and went into, so I don't think I was impacted by that. But I believe at this point that we have now had, 40 years of a culture that has been specific to boys and marketing computers, marketing games. Even if you see games there, you hardly ever see a girl playing a computer game. It's always focused around boys. So there's problem one. We have a cultural problem with that. Number two, the other, if you go back to that point in time, how many Black families could have afforded $1,500? I don't know how much a TRS-80 was at the time, but it was not cheap.
Oh no, you're talking about $2,000 computers to get an Apple II,
Yeah, exactly. So
it was extremely expensive.
We don't have that. And even today, we're having discussions about children needing to go to school because they don't have computers, and most of those children are Black and brown. Now, the cool thing is open source has, if people had access to computers, open source has the ability to be a platform to democratize software development. Because anybody who wants to get involved in an open source community can do so, and they don't have to have a whole lot of experience if the open source community is driven with the correct heart. I was sitting at last year at DevOps World. I went to one of their inclusive lunches, and I was sitting with maybe 2 Black men, and the rest were white women. And I asked, how many people here have contributed to an open source? They all looked at me like I was crazy to even ask the question. And a woman raised her hand, and she goes, well, I did try to commit to the Jenkins community, and nobody ever responded to my pull request.
Interesting.
Now, by that time, Jenkins has already got its good old boys club, and I hate to say it that way, but that's what happened. So open source could be a platform for us to help fix these problems, but I think that open source has created an interesting culture of its own, with committers getting, recognition and badges, and people being kind of put up on a pedestal. And that pull request from that woman who said, I'm going to try, they just didn't pay attention to, and maybe they should have. So if there's a way for open source to help democratize the education of more than just the people even coming out of college, there are plenty of people who have never went to. I mean, Bill Gates didn't finish college, So there's ways that we can fix this, but it does require us to recognize that there's a problem in the first place. And I think generally in the United States, that's our biggest issue, is we don't understand that our culture comes from a place of white supremacy. I'm not saying we're not, that doesn't mean we're all racist. It just means that our culture and our laws have been built by white men, and have been defined by it. And so we live that. And so
it's the whole topic of systemic, not racism, but
yes. But we all have to recognize we live in a white supremacy society, that everything we've done in the past 200 plus years is based on that. So if we can acknowledge that, then we can move forward. But if we can't acknowledge that, it's going to be hard to move forward.
Well, let me first say I contribute to the conversation as both an ally and, I've learned based on where I am in my station in life, I truly don't understand, and I can't understand myself, but I can be an ally for helping. And I've been through the same, because I graduated in early 80s myself. And that was kind of when we were getting rid of the wild things happening at parties, and, women were there as objects, not as, coworkers and all that kind of thing. But I agree with you. It totally swung to the good old boys network, is just exclude people. And we had this whole philosophy, maybe still do, of it's give everybody an even break, create an environment where people have opportunity. And my learning, at least my belief, is that's great, but if it's systemically built against a class of people from gaining and for themselves and being part of the community, giving them an opportunity to be there is just like, okay, yeah, you can commit code, but if we're going to be a good old boy network, what's the ability to commit code? So for me personally, I don't say this anyway to pat my own self on the back. The only thing I could figured I could really do, at least at the time, was as I was working with people, and this was probably more with women than it was with people of color, because we're not working with as many, is if there's for example, a salary discrepancy, don't go through the let's step 2, 3, and we'll get you there. If you're 30% behind where the market is, or whatever that number is, go to market. If whatever we're paying people that have that same ability and in that same job, let's put people there and catch it up in one step. And so I think it's to your point about we have to remove some of that systemic part of our environment and not just be welcoming, if you will.
Yeah, and that's hard. I mean, do you think that the folks at Tandy realized that they were excluding women in technology because they were creating a commercial that showed the little girl standing in the back and the little boy hogging the computer, meaning that's not your toy? They probably didn't recognize that. What they were saying is dads will spend this money on the sons, but they won't spend money on the daughters. So let's market in the way that we know will sell the product, right?
Good at science girls on or whatever, that kind of nonsense. But
so it's it's so deep in who we are. It's so and if you're a minority, that's just doubled, right? If you just have, I have challenges being a woman. I in terms of looking for funding for Deploy Hub, we're looking at 2% of investment go to women, 2%. Wow. So I'm competing with all the women for 2% of the investment dollar, which is literally impossible. I always get, it's too early. And then I'll be on a call with a couple of guys who just got, $2 million on a white paper. Okay, so that's not too early. Mm-hmm. It's come on. But I get it. I totally get it. And this is something that we all have to think about and want to solve. We have to have the drive and we have to want to solve it. And and a lot of people who are already in a place of privilege, they don't want to solve it. What motivates why would they want to solve it? And that's why you have people protesting. We have come to that boiling point where we have to get loud. Mm-hmm. We have to get loud.
Yeah, I count myself as very lucky, not only because I am privileged and all of that, and I am, but my family, my stepkids, I have kind of 2 generations of kids, my first kids, and then about 7, 8 years later, a couple of stepkids who were in their mid-20s. And they think about the world very differently. And the whole systemic racism and discrimination, we have a lot of conversations that are, and also, non-binary sexuality, all kinds of things that challenge me to I don't even know how to talk about it, more or less think about it. It's been super helpful. One of the things I've really discovered in the workplace, though, is as I've worked with people coming out of college, women coming out of college, this generation is fearless when it comes to technology. There aren't tech people and non-tech people. Everybody's a tech person. And, it's we did a study with a focus group one time, and this person had poured cement on their back porch. And have you ever done that before? No, I'd never done it before. Well, how did you decide you could do this on your own? Well, I looked up on YouTube and I found a video and it was 3 minutes long. I figured if it was 3 minutes long, I could do it. That was how hard it is measure. So maybe some of that will also help, where it will be a wave at some point of new people that are just going to think differently about it. And I'm hopeful that will be part of the solution too. Yeah,
that's sort of at DevOps World last year, I met a woman from CloudBees, and I wish I knew her name right now. Beautiful Black woman, fairly high up in the management order of CloudBees. And she sat at a table, a different lunch that I had gone to. And somebody asked her, how did you get to where you're at? And she said, there was a point in my life that I decided to own it. And when I made the decision to own it, it made me realize that I belong at the table. Mm-hmm. I belong in the room, but I had to figure out that I had to own it first. And she said sometimes it's hard for people to own it because they don't have the confidence. Mm-hmm. They don't have the mentors. They don't have somebody to look up to who owned it before them. And I think that's kind of what you're saying. And the millennials, they owned it because they saw it on a YouTube video. And they said, oh, I can do that. So I think that the challenge of women and the challenge of minorities is that we have to own it, and we have to step up, and we have to be loud about it. We have to remind people that that commercial is not appropriate. Don't you get that? Didn't you see that? And that it happens everywhere. I mean, I went to, and this is the last story I'll tell about this topic.
I'm happy to go as long as you want.
But it's a Microsoft story, but it truly did happen. So I went to a Microsoft partner conference, and we got a bag, and they put us on a bus, and we got to go to their store. And it was really beautiful. That campus is gorgeous. It was a lot of fun being there, and they treated us all extremely well, all equally. It was beautiful. Until I went into the store. And I went into the store with my little coupon, which we could get anything we wanted in the store with our coupon. And I saw this really cool black t-shirt, and it just said geek on it. And I'm looking around, and I pull up the extra small men's, and it was pretty big for me. So I went over to the woman at the register, and I said, do you have this in the ladies? She goes, well, not exactly that one. We have a pink one. I was like, oh, that's even better. I'll take pink. I love pink. So she showed me where to go. I opened it up, and it didn't say geek on it. It says, I love geeks.
Ouch.
And I held it up, and I was like, I'm supposed to wear this to say I love myself? I'm not sure what this means. So later the next day, we were sitting at a dinner, and I had like 3 Microsoft execs and 2 other partners at the table. And they wanted to start conversation. They said, so what did you get at the store?
Oh, here you go. I'm so glad you asked, right?
And the guy that came, and I didn't volunteer. I just was like, the store, that was a bad experience. So I didn't volunteer. The guy next to me said, I got my daughter a t-shirt that says, I love geeks. I looked at him straight in the eye. I said, burn the freaking thing. Are you an idiot?
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh.
And he said, why? She loves her daddy. And I said, you don't get it, do you? And then the other guy sitting next to me on the other side looked at me, and he said, oh my God, I am so sorry. And the guy from Microsoft said, oh, that's bad, isn't it? And I was like, yeah, it was really bad. So about a month later, I got a gift in the mail. And I opened it up, and it was this really cool dark blue hoodie. In pink across it, it says geek.
Awesome.
With a note from the guy who said, I'm sorry. And he said, I ordered 500 of these, and I've sent it out to every woman in technology that I know.
That is fantastic. I mean,
isn't that a great story? And of course,
is.
I got an email from the Microsoft exec that told me we've taken them all off the shelves, and we've explained to the person who buys for our store that was not the very appropriate, clothing for our women. It was like nobody else noticed it. What the heck?
That's the whole, systemic part of it is you don't know it's there, and certainly I've been very guilty of that myself too. I know I'm sure there are many situations I don't even know about today, but at least when it was recognized and brought up, the aha moment happened. Better than that is they did something about it. Now,
they did. They corrected it.
The world's problems, but it is a step, and that's what I would add to what you said is, yes, you have to own it as a Black person or a person of color, as a woman. I have to own it. I have to own it too. And I'm not owning it in the same way, but I'm owning it to be an ally and to want to learn and make changes where I can make changes, because that's the action that I can take. I can't speak for a whole class of white males, but that I think is what the other side of it is, because then you change the system, as well as like you're talking about. Is I'm not going to let things get in my way. I'm not going to let people impressions of whatever, their discrimination or whatever. That is not who I am. I'm this person, and this is what I'm going to do. This is where I'm going to be and how I'm going to get there. So good for you. But that's how I feel about it. I'm sure there's a lot of people that wouldn't agree with me, but
well,
I have three very strong women in my group. So there's good reason why I've gotten a little bit of progress in my thinking. Are there any good things happening? organizations or groups, or not that that's always the solution to it, but are there any things happening that you would point people to as this is helpful, it's a good book, or it's a good person, or anything like that?
I don't off the top of my head, but I can tell you.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Sorry about that.
No, I know, but I can tell you that I'm really proud right now of the Continuous Delivery Foundation, the CD Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
We are really, there's several women who are running it. And it's a struggle. It really is, to try to include more women in like the conferences, to encourage them to submit talks. We started something on LinkedIn, a LinkedIn group called the SheDF.
Oh, that's great.
Yes. So the SheDF, where we can encourage each other to submit for talks and to get yourself in front of people. I call it, share your she wisdom, because we need women we just need women back in the picture. And the CDF has done a pretty, they really are focused on and being as inclusive as possible. Women of color, actually being inclusive to as much as we can. The concern about the SheDF was, well, what if they're trans? It's like, well, anybody who relates to being a woman, we don't care where they started. But we're feeling super careful about it. And we have an interesting group of women who are working on it, and I'm very, very proud of them. It's so fun to be on a call, and it's just women. Mm-hmm. From a technical, I know there'll be one board member who shows up and he's a man, and he's like, whoa, I'm overwhelmed here.
Now you know what it feels like, by the way.
Exactly. We tell them that too. It's like, now you get it.
Because, now, what's your involvement in
the board?
Okay. Board member.
Board. Yeah, and I'm very involved in the outreach. Tracy Miranda, who works for CloudBeast, she runs our open source. We've become very, very close. Even she lives in Canada. I live in New Mexico, but we're on a phone or a Zoom meeting on a regular basis. They call us Tracy Squared, because we both have similar backgrounds. Mm-hmm. So I'm having a lot of fun with it, and we're being just as proactive as possible to get more women involved. But I can tell you, it is a heavy lift, because you have to find them and hang on to them and coach them and encourage them to get their faces out there.
You do. It requires effort, and it requires dedication.
Mentorship.
I totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
From the men of the world, especially. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean about our part of the commitment. So I'm certainly no poster person for solving the issue, but I want to do everything I can to help. Anytime you want to come on and talk about that, you're always welcome. Of course, and will always talk about Deploy Hub and the great things that are happening at your company, and news and exciting thing there. But I'd love to kind of get some kind of a dialogue going on a semi-regular basis on topics and
that would be great. I think having a topic on getting women in technology and encouraging young girls to go into programming is really, really critical.
So if you're out there and you want to talk about this and have a dialogue about it and help people like me and others understand people of color, whatever it is, non-binary sexuality, all of those things, I think that conversation hopefully can help us move from learning to action. So,
and the good news is we're having the conversation. You're having conversations with your stepchildren that you didn't with your first set of kids.
Oh, no, not at all.
That's already a shift.
Exercising every inherent bias and stereotype or whatever, I'm sure.
That is already a shift. The conversation is where it starts. That's why it's so important to start talking about it.
Well, I have a lot of people to thank. And first couple of managers I had were women, actually. So, and I have reached back to what were some of those experiences I realized I got from it, but I didn't realize it until I thought about it. It was huge, had an influence on me. So I'm trying to give back in some way. So Thank you for helping me do that and for helping our audience.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. And yes, I'll come back anytime you want to talk about diversity or any of these topics, because I'm pretty passionate about it all. And if you're out there and you want to get involved in an open source, check out Ortelius. Abraham Ortelius was the first map maker. He created the first world atlas. Talk about a hard job. How would you even do that?
Problem.
He had to go all the way around every continent to do it. That's a serious surveying problem.
That's somebody had a different paradigm in mind for how he's going to go build a map, right?
He had to reimagine it, and we're reimagining how we're mapping out a cluster, and that's why we used his name.
Interesting. You wonder how many things that person did that have carried through today. We don't realize that, well, we separate the map, we lay it out this way or whatever things, because they laid the foundation for it. And maybe you're doing the same thing with
How many
Artillix.
people do you think told him he was insane?
Well, yeah, I'm sure everyone did. Yeah, especially his family.
You're going to do what? You're going to take a boat along the coastline of every single, that's insane.
I've sure heard a lot of, that's a dumb idea. What were you thinking?
Why would you want to do that?
Exactly. Well, Tracy Reagan, it's been great. I hope people will check out Deploy Hub, the new release 9, the great things that you've done to simplify the product. I wish you the best. And fundraising or whatever it is, as well as product, and helping us all get code out to into the fabric of our environment faster.
Thank you, Mitch. It's a pleasure.
You bet.
Hey, thanks, Mitch. Thanks, Tracy. Keep up the great work. Well, folks, as I said, pretty full show today, 2.5+ hours. We hope you enjoy it. We hope you've enjoyed it. And we'll be back. Well, today is Tuesday, so we'll be back Thursday with a fresh show. I have a really great interview Thursday, by the way, coming up with my friend Brad Feld about his new book called The Startup Community's Way, and it should be a good one. So if you tune in Thursday for my interview with Brad, and we'll have, of course, a lot more than that. Until then, tomorrow we will be replaying a past TechStrong TV, so enjoy that. And, as I say at the end of every show, stay well, stay safe, stay strong, TechStrong. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.